Looking to traffic control, squad 5, over to 273, over to 18, 18 battalion, over to 273, 273.
Well, welcome to another edition of Fire and Training. I'm your host, Doug Cline. We're live from FDIC International 2018. What an awesome show that we've got going on here with great speakers, great education, tons of vendors, people coming into the show, and you know it's just an awesome show. And this is a great group of people we're going to be talking with. I'll introduce them in just a second, but you know, I want to throw out there's nothing more than being excited about having a show and great fire service leaders that are here with us. But FDIC International, so many people from every geographic location you can think about across the world internationally, and you know all that's not possible without our sponsor, which is 3M Scott Fire and Safety, which is sponsoring the Trusted Voices of the Fire Service on our live shows here from FDIC International 2018. And they're doing a lot here at FDIC. And, you know, you can stop by their booth and check them out, the 3M booth, the Scott Fire and Safety booth, and see all the products they have, all the new technology that's out there. On Thursday, the 26th through Saturday, the 28th, they have the 3M Safety Roadshow at booth space 15003 on South Street. That's outside, and what they'll be doing is showing their mobile training center, the designs. They're showcasing that with a lot of expertise that's going on out there about their personal protective equipment and all the other products they have. The National Fallen Firefighters Foundation is on Thursday as well. The Stop Drop Rock and Roll event, Indianapolis Rooftop Ballroom, that starts at 7 p.m. goes to 11 p.m. You don't want to miss that. It's for a great cause. And also on Friday, we have the stair climb, the Memorial Stair Climb. The Heat and Scott Firefighter Combat Challenge is going on Friday and Saturday. So we can't thank 3M and Scott Fire and Safety enough for being here. Well, joining me with Fire and Training today is Les Stevens, Fire Chief out in San Marcos, Texas, retired Battalion Chief out of FDNY. Jerry Tracy and my esteemed colleague, Christopher Nam from the Command Institute, Chief of Training. So guys, welcome. Great show, huh?
Absolutely. Great place to be.
Chris and I were on yesterday, did a little bit of talking. I'm going to hit Les. Tell everybody what you were working on in the pre-conference on Monday. I had an opportunity to sit in this class and get my toes stepped on a little bit about what I do wrong when it comes to getting ready for different things that you may be taking on in your career, like, you know, a promotion to a deputy chief within a department, or maybe you're aspiring to be a captain in the department. Talk about the program you did.
We did a 4-hour workshop on fire service career path planning, and basically challenged them. We had everything in there from tailboard firefighters up to 5 bugle chiefs, and talking about career planning, not waiting until the job posting that you're interested in comes out, but having some idea where you want to be in your career, you know, 5 years, 10 years down the road, looking at the postings and what those positions require currently, and starting to set some goals, some intermediate goals to help you become prepared. The education, the certification, you know, experience, time on the job all go together, but it takes all 3 of those to find someone that's well-rounded and qualified, competent, and ready to step into those roles. And a lot of times we find people that, you know, it just kind of hits them at the last minute that they want to do something, but they didn't do the right things to prepare for it. And that class gives us a good opportunity to start that discussion. I was really encouraged to have some guys in there that are just starting out in their careers that were interested in being a part of that discussion, and hopefully, you know, sharing it with other people like yourself who have influence within their organizations that can go back and encourage other people, because that's something that's easier done over time than all at once.
Absolutely. And I carried that over into the next morning into my program with professional development, developing the next generation of fire service leaders, and helping organizations develop a plan to get people ready to take these positions or to move forward, having a structured component, but also educating, the individuals in the room, what is important. And again, I use a four-stool approach method with the legs of being training and education and experience and self-development, but tying it all together with mentoring and coaching to make that a very solid base that you could, rest yourself upon as you're going, and it would continue to grow and do things. So so far we've done a lot of that here at FDIC, seeing a lot of it, a lot of networking. And Chief Tracy, I know that you were doing some high-rise stuff with Jack Murphy at the beginning of the week.
Yes, Monday morning, but I might like to add to what we were just talking about, career development, things like that. Much of the fire service, we're not talking about the volunteer sector, much of the fire service is civil service. And people gravitate towards civil service jobs for various reasons. And that could be salary. It could be you'd like to help the public and you want to make a difference there. Or you just want, let's say, benefits and a salary, career. To say, once you join that career, I can think back to the days I was in high school. Did I not know what I wanted to do for the rest of my life? Of course not. And when you join the fire service, do you aspire to, oh, I want to become chief of the department one day, things like that? Maybe not. I may have just joined just to be a firefighter type thing. Where I'm going with this is it should be planned in, let's say, the academy at the recruit stage, whereas you could have a speaker say that, okay, if you study for promotion, you'll learn more about the job. But really, it should be put forth that all the things that are required to study going to make you a better firefighter, going to make you a better team player. You're going to understand not only building construction and the weaknesses that how buildings are compromised. You're going to better understand how fire behaves in those buildings, the dynamics of it, and oxygen and things like that. We as a team are going to become better. So whether you want to take that test for promotion or not, all of this information is going to help you. And it might spark a passion, kindle the flames of passion in you to where you'll go far and wide, even beyond the bibliography of the promotional exam itself. And someday you'll make a difference in the fire service.
That's actually a great point. I know actually the UK model makes use of that type of fundamental approach toward educational and competency skills. And again, although an individual may stay within the rank of a firefighter, but they all begin with that fundamental piece and continue down these paths, which allow them to then pursue various types of managerial supervisory roles. But that is a key point. We don't spend enough time developing those. We end up, plateauing them out at a certain stage based upon rank. As a firefighter, here's all you really need to know. We compartmentalize it versus giving them the depth and breadth of some of the information. So excellent point from that standpoint.
I'm definitely thinking that that happens or should happen on the career side. But I know, and you guys know, that a lot of America's fire service is volunteer.
Right. And
we're missing, in my opinion, we're missing so much by not having that indoctrinated into the volunteer concept of you still need to grow. You still need to have certain things in place, for your development to move through, because making decisions as a company officer on a volunteer piece, riding in on a residential structure fire or a commercial strip, job or whatever is the same no matter what. It's still the same concepts, and understanding what you're talking about it, it's going to make you a better firefighter. It's going to make you a better team player. I think that's important. I know that I've got the unique opportunity to be working with Candace McDonald on a column in Fire Rescue Magazine called The Volunteer Viewpoint, and it's the doctor and the chief speaking here. So it was really unique when I began coming from the volunteer fire service initially into the career side, and now being in a large combination department myself, how important that is. And we see that across the board, is that there has to be parity in what we're doing, because this is a professional business. We're not, just because you don't get a paycheck doesn't mean you're not fighting the same fires. And you guys know that. And I want our listeners out there to understand that that's just as important. And I think we fail to emphasize that as much as we probably should. in the realm of things. What do y'all think?
There shouldn't be a distinction between volunteer and career. All right, fire service is fire service. The job is the job, and the demands of the job may change relative to high urban environment, rural, or suburban. So let's give that a given. I'll succeed to the fact that based upon demand of operations, maybe there might potentially suggest a slightly diminished or different type of curriculum or level of intensity. But nonetheless, whether we're a firefighter on the volunteer or the career side, there should be a clearly established requirement for certification, and even more so, some of the movement currently is for recertification. So much of our curriculum-based standards, NFPA 1001, 1021 for firefighter and officer, in many states and many jurisdictions or authorities having jurisdiction, do not require recertification. You get your 1001, you got it back in whatever, it's lifetime. There's no need to provide for skill set proficiencies or even test those on any basis. So part of the challenge is if we take a look at line of duty deaths, near miss reporting system, information, much of it goes back to a lack of knowledge base or a proficiency based skill set or skill sets that never were developed. So you suddenly become the officer through whatever means in your organization. Some may have a very explicit, very stringent level that mirrors a career department civil service. Others may not. And again, I'm talking about volunteer or career. So we have a lot of great systems out there that are models, but sometimes we just fail to react because there's such a demand for time and effort and so forth. So, the point being, if we can put some level of consistency out there for training, inclusive of opportunities such as FDIC, where there's continuing education credit that you can all apply to that part of it. But I firmly believe, and in my 43 years of being involved in the service, that those gaps continue to exist and they are widening. So at some point through the various elements that are out there, the academies, the state systems, the local level elements, if we can get some consistency toward it, it's going to better the job down the road for everyone.
I think it would help if, let's say the government, I'll start there, the U.S., then the states themselves, going all the way down into the counties, if you will. Exactly what you're saying is come up with some consistencies. A lot of money is wasted. I mean, Long Island itself, how many different departments are there in Nassau County, Suffolk County, and every one of those departments has a heavy rescue apparatus. New York City has 5. We have 5 boroughs. To say that's a lot of money wasted in that during the day, you don't even have anybody to staff that apparatus, let alone the pumper for a kitchen fire. To say if money became available for training and money became available for staffing for these rural sectors, that could help. That you could have combination departments because you're still going to need the volunteer sector, but you would get some consistency with respect to training, consistency, maybe less waste of money on duplication of apparatus. You have hazmat teams could respond to regions and things like that for confined space, all of those things. In other words, it could be better managed for all of these people, and training would be available.
Well, again, I think consistency-wise, there's a lot of great systems out there, all the way from the local county, municipality, to the state, to the federal level. So we've done a lot of great things in a lot of short years, or a lot of long years. I mean, it's taken the National Fire, look at the National Fire Academy from, the late 70s to now, and we're still, discovering that some of our students, potential students, don't even know that the academy exists, let alone that there's free training and so forth. So constant issues dealing with informational exchanges and what we share with our personnel at the station level, department level, or what have you. But going back to the clear edge, talking about professional development, opportunities for advancement and so forth, it all fundamentally goes back to what the chief just talked about, establishing a foundation that's consistent and portable from state to state on a national level. So now whether I'm going from Texas or New York or Florida, which obviously, again, we recognize that there are different standards at the state level in Florida, of which portability of credentials from Texas or New York or anywhere in the country have to completely be going back to start at zero. We've got to reestablish them. So you may have all of the executive level credentials as a chief officer in Texas, but you're going to have to either retest. Yeah. So there has to be some portability around that from the state level. And again, part of that, IFSAC, Pro Board, local, state level. Everybody's got a whole bunch of different working parts, but you know, you have to have a plan in place. And sometimes we leave it up to the individuals that you described to have some initiative, or we establish it back from day one. Candidate coming in, we give them a roadmap, make them aware of it, train up to a certain level of proficiencies, and then allow them to go wherever they want to go. Supervisory, company officer, command, so forth, EMS, rescue, whatever, support, fire marshals, I mean, everything. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So, you know, Billy Hayes would be a great one to be sitting in this room, because Billy Hayes is always talking about what? Fire prevention. We seldom talk about that as one of the paths and so forth, but it really should be first and foremost. But we're always on the suppression
Would
side,
fire
so.
prevention have alleviate, or the Grenfell event, would it have helped? Because that building, before it was renovated with combustible cladding, building had issues to begin with. It's on a dead-end street, which has to tell you it's on a dead-end water main. What's the capability of capacity of that water main? One single stairwell for the building, which would mean that self-closing doors is that much more important in a building with single stairwell, because those self-closing devices were inoperative. Is another reason for having so many souls killed at that event. So, I mean, fire prevention, yes, is very important.
Absolutely it is. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the opening ceremony. I got one word: wow. I was I reflected all the way through there with Chief Halton's speech about you know, the honor, the fortitude, the valor, the things that the firefighters have that are our morals and our values that are so challenged in today's society, and that we still maintain that and we move forward. And then, you know, seeing the recipient from Cobb County, Georgia, with amazing water rescue. I'll be real honest, it's a wonder that both of those kids were not dead. And you know, he was, in my book, a hero. Any day of the week, I will tell him, I'll shake his hand, because I'm gonna tell you what, he did a heck of a job. And then moving into a topic with our keynoter about behavior and mental health. And I think that's something that we need to bring to the forefront. And I'm going to step out there and when we talk about fire and training, that is training. And it's about what our job is. And everybody runs bad calls. We know everybody gets those tough jobs. And, you know, we've got to get people to understand, in my opinion, it's okay that you're feeling bad and you need some help in dealing with it. And I know for years I've had a reoccurring dream. And, you know, for a number of years, I never messed with it. It was, you know, back in my hometown, and y'all won't think I'm crazy, but I am. I'll just quantify that before we get started.
Up front.
But, you know, Jerry was talking about he didn't know what he wanted to do in high school. My mom tells me my first word, I was trying to say fire truck. You know, which is funny. And my whole life, this is all I've ever wanted to do. I mean, I dreamed as a kid of being a firefighter, and it never went away. And, you know, now I'm in the business. And, you know, I've had some pretty tough situations, to include a suicide in the station, to losing friends, losing a mentee relationship with the mentee, you know, passing away with Robin Brockstrom, which was almost career ending. That took a lot of work to get past. Thank goodness for her mom, who like threatened to kill me if I didn't continue. And, you know, I'm thankful to Arlene, but, you know, we work with people all the time, and we run these calls. And this recurrent dream goes back to, I guess I was a child and I was in a grocery cart. And that's the grocery cart represents my childhood, because I'll be in the grocery cart and my desire to be the fire service. This is how the EAP person was telling me. And I was going to the fire station in my hometown as a volunteer, but I never could get past the one place. I never could get there. Well, in my career, a lot of times we never got where we needed to be. And we had not necessarily line of duty deaths on all these cases, but we had in the line of our operation civilian deaths, you know, that we dealt with. And of course, there are some line of duty deaths that are out there, and personal close friends of mine. And I guess you know, pulling some folks out, doing the job that we do. And then, you know, one particular case kind of haunts us, definitely haunts me, is I had my hands on somebody that was combative from the toxins, and they pulled away from me. And I was already where the bell on the 3M Scott fire and safety air pack that I was wearing was pulsating, because when I would breathe in, it quit ringing. So that was definitely telling me I was low on air. And I tried gallantly to try to find her in a real quick area, and I never did. And I had to make the decision to bail, and, you know, the crew to bail and us be safe, and try to redeploy to try to, you know, save that victim, which we were unfortunate that we did not. But that reoccurring dream, you know, occurs, and people don't understand the mental health and the behavior things that we're talking about, and especially, you know, as they were talking about alcoholism, that is huge. We know that, you know, people struggle daily, and, you know, you guys are well seasoned into this, and I know you've probably dealt with it, but I wanted to start this conversation out there because we need to be having these, and I think you guys could reiterate some thoughts.
And I know in Texas, just in the last few weeks, you know, we've had an instance of this, and a friend of mine just received the Fire Chief of the Year award, Rusty Wilson, who left Irving and took the chief's job in Katy. And one of the things that his members there in Katy nominated him for was that they had a young man commit suicide in their station, just a bunk room or two away from the dining area. And, you know, they were really having a tough time coping with that. And Chief Wilson was able to go in and kind of bring a fresh start and a new perspective to that. And it was really cool to see what a major impact that had on some of the members. And they were, you know, that were struggling personally with the after effects of one of their coworkers, you know, taking their own life in the fire station. And I think you're absolutely right. I think we need to shine a light on it. I think we need to do everything we can, just like we're doing with cancer. We need to do everything we can to understand it. You know, obviously, different events affect different people different ways. And I think that's what we've really got to start to try to get a better grip on, is why are certain people affected by certain calls? Others make all those same calls, but then it's an event in their private life that triggers this PTSD. And we're learning more about PTSI, you know, that we've all got that just from the calls we've made. And I think that's going to be a key to this is starting to better understand it, become more informed, more educated about it, and then also, you know, knowing what to look for in those people that are around us, and just being more aware.
And you mentioned what to look for, and hopefully I won't lose it here, but in the case where Dwight killed himself in our station, this was back in the early 80s. I was a new lieutenant, and Dwight had just got married, had a beautiful wife. He lived, you know, kind of back up, you know, in West Virginia, up in what we call a holler. Back up.
Tell me more about that later.
So, yeah, you're from Texas, everything's flat. But, you know, on Sundays, you know, we had our own dispatch in the station there, where they, you know, would receive the alarm, and we would communicate. There in the city, it was kind of passed down, and I remember him and the dispatcher that worked day shift would a lot of times reload shells, because they both love to shoot. They love guns. They love to shoot. Jeff was challenged with some health issues, and he was active at one time, you know, in the service, but, you know, he took that position because he couldn't do the job anymore. But they would sit there and they would reload. And one day I walked into the kitchen, and he was cutting the top of the bullet. And I'm like, asking why. Well, he said, well, he was a military guy. He was an Army guy. He was actually, you know, one of those special force type people. And he said, it'll make the bullet fragment and go in multiple directions. It causes more damage. He said, you know, I'm putting this in the guns at the house, so if anybody comes, because we live way off the beaten path, if anybody would try to break in, you know, it's going to be a stopper. I was like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. You know, maybe I should consider that, you know, because I got guns and I got bullets, and, you know, I was kind of like learning, you know, from what I call gurus on guns. And so I didn't think anything about it. And about 2 weeks later, I came in, and it was on a Sunday, and that's generally when they did that. And he was painting the bullets with lead paint. And I'm like, that's interesting. Why are you doing that? And he said, well, in the military, you try to leverage every advantage you can. And he said, this is like guerrilla warfare tactics. You know, if the bullet doesn't kill him, the lead paint will be absorbed into the body called lead poisoning. And I'm thinking, dude, man, you really, how far up that holler do you live? I never been to his house. And I grew up in West Virginia, so never thought anything about it. The following week, we had a specialized class. This was when hazmat was coming about in the early 80s. And I'm sitting in there. I'll never forget the instructor was Jerry Rodenberry from down in McDowell County. I ended up working for Jerry in a fast forward, 5, 6, 7 years, starting a paramedic program for the county. I actually went there to be over the EMS division. And in this, we had taken a break, and Jack Eaton and I had come in, and Jack was a big coffee drinker. And he was making another fresh pot of coffee, and I heard, pow! And I thought, Jack dropped that coffee pot, and I bet he's got coffee all over him, and he's probably got cuts. Let me go in there. When I walked in there, Jack's holding the coffee pot. I'll never forget this. And he's standing there with his mouth wide open, and Dwight's on the floor. Well, Dwight had walked in, an old military guy, and he jacked the chamber and dropped the clip and said, hey, y'all, watch this. Pulled the trigger. And anybody that knows anything about guns knows the military guys are very diligent about dropping the clip, jacking the chamber, checking it, doing everything they do. And they ruled it accidental, but to me, I'm pretty certain it was suicide. Well, I ended up working the call, going to the hospital, realizing this guy was not going to make it even though he was alive, sitting on the floor in the ER crying because I didn't know what to do, and then being told, hey, you got to go get his wife. So I made out of the ladder 49 the white car visit or the red car visit. I went and got his wife, and she divulged some information, on the way to the hospital about some issues they were having and some things like that. But basically, if he died, she was taken care of in an insurance type policy. And, I struggled with that. I mean, I truly struggled with that to the point that I was going to school. I was in college at the time, and I actually changed my major to social work with a focus in counseling so that I could actually make another impact or a difference. And I wouldn't have that because I missed things. And you talking about missing things actually just spurred that thought to my head. So, this is real stuff that we deal with, and we've all been on really bad stuff. And Chief Tracy, I know that you ran probably more calls than all of us. It may be put together in your borough, but you see guys on job. With Chris and I've had this conversation multiple times about the line of duty deaths that he's been involved in, and y'all chime in about what's happening.
I think one of the common themes from today's keynote was recognition and engagement.
Yeah.
So of all the things, so we have calls and runs that we go in on that create some burden in our minds. All right, that's one element. There's our lifestyles of what's happening that we used to know much more about our personnel, but now with the change in the service, we don't have the level of engagement of personnel. Sometimes we create artificial barriers. The bosses don't ask the question of the guys don't engage at the kitchen table. So, there's a lot of things moving around, all of which are going back to mental health and the issues affecting us on the job and off the job. But I think the one clear message that resonated from the keynote was talk and engage. And the common element there was how a simple question or a simple level of engagement was, how you doing? Hello. How's your day going? For one individual, as he utilized as an example, triggered another element with some issues that they knew were there, but no one ever engaged the guy to ask something as, how you doing? That suddenly replied back, okay, and this and that, and then simple thanks to the boss saying, thank you, and that creates the opportunity to delve into something else. So I think we have to be open to recognize that, the burdens that we share with the job and the demands of the job don't have to be internalized, because they ultimately will affect our families, ultimately affect the brothers and sisters of the job. We have to open up. So that's where we're going with the fire service. We have to recognize that there are opportunities to reach out and get help, but sometimes it's the most simplest thing that all of us can do talk to one another.
Right.
Get the guys back. And again, it's not just the younger guys. Whoever the candidates are, whoever the probies are, whoever the younger members are, bring them back to the kitchen table. Bring them back into the day room. Get them out of wherever they're at and talk. Share. So now I can know. Now I know what's going on in your family. Now I know what may have been a good or bad call. Go back out in the truck bay. Go back up in the chief's office, the boss's office, and communicate. Open up. And that's, I think, one of the biggest takeaways. We for many, many decades of time just kept it amongst ourselves, and that was one of the common themes too. We hold it all in. We come back off a shift. We go back home from either an individual call on the volunteer side or coming off shift, and we carry that with us. And we don't know where we're creating a different person inside, but there's help out there. There's a variety of different things, and just like everything else, we're opening up this sort of dark area that we've known for decades. But communication is a big thing.
You mentioned alcoholism. I belong to the CIA, Catholic Irish Alcoholic. When we have, let's say, coalitions, things like that, for the passing of brother or sister firefighters, whether it's line of duty or not, line of duties, the union hosts a coalition and they buy the beer. They send us home. Now, private industry has stopped having Christmas parties with alcohol because they don't want to send, so you know I'm going. So I've met firefighters in my career, both, as peers and as chief, that have had issues. And I have, let's say, engaged them privately and opened up to them that I had issues with alcohol and how to address it. To say, there is help. At the time that I was seeking help, I wanted to seek out firefighters because I didn't think that there was anybody else on, civilians couldn't understand my issues because I'm a firefighter, and maybe another firefighter would understand, and that's what helped me. So yeah, there is help out there.
There is, and I want to throw out the Florian program. If you don't know what it is, go on and take a look at that. There is some help for that.
Well, the IFF Excellence Center is another one that's out there that's doing some great work. Last I heard, that 28 inpatient people, I think they have the capacity for somewhere up to 60, 62 people. Yeah. Sounds familiar, but they're doing some good stuff. And a friend of mine's there right now getting some help with issues, and they're the only program that treats both the psychological and the dependency issues simultaneously. And they brought together some really high-speed folks to help with that. And I think we're going to, unfortunately, those people are also being studied, and we're going to see what we can learn from them to help us address other individuals facing those same struggles.
Absolutely. Well, we're close on time. Up next is the F.O.O.L.S group. Look forward to the guys standing in the hallway waiting anxiously to get in, and their message that they're going to be bringing you. I'm sure it's as always a very good message and very candid conversation and dialogue. Again, thanking 3M Scott Fire and Safety for their hosting of the Trusted Voices on the radio from Fire Engineering, and we're live from FDIC. You've been watching and listening to Fire and Training. I'm your host, Douglas Cline, and the cast that's with us today. We greatly appreciate your time and your willingness to be on the show and watch and be a good follower. If you're not at FDIC this year, I don't care what you got to do. You got to be here next year. It's an incredible conference. It's the best conference that you'll ever go to, and you'll walk away with batteries charged. Until the next time that we get together, remember one thing. Our whole effort is to make sure that everyone goes home, and getting the men and women that are out on our streets the right information, the right training, the right abilities to do the job the way that we want the job done, but we want it safely, and we want you to go home to the true unsung heroes who are our families that allow us to do this great profession. So until next time, stay safe, train often, and make sure that everyone goes home.
Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Unmute. Squad 5, Squad 5. Over to 273, 273. Over battalion, King battalion. With a 273, 273.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rich Stack. I'm with Fools International. I'm the president. I'm here with our e-board as well as one of our founders, John Bart Simpson. I want to thank Fire Engineering for allowing us to be here today, as well as 3M Scott Fire and Safety. They are a proud sponsor of Fire Engineering's Trusted Voices radio show that we're doing live today here from FDIC 2018. So as we go on, we just want to thank everyone for attending FDIC 2018. Every year, it's a pretty good experience. I know for us, just to be able to attend, we have a lot of FOOLS members that not only attend, but also present hot classes, workshops, as well as us ourselves attending the workshop and hot classes. So it's a great experience, great way to network. And we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about the FOOLS organization, our experience, how it's kind of intertwined with FDIC, how it all got started. The fact that we have Bart with us here is always nice because when the farmers can kind of tie in how this all started, the Brotherhood Bash, the meeting in the basement over at the Hampton, and the true meaning what the Brotherhood Bash started with. So from that, we're just going to open up to each other. We're going to kind of talk that. I'm going to actually kind of turn it to Bart because you kind of started all this. And
yeah, we started, most of the founding members of the FOOLS helped bring FDIC from Cincinnati to Indianapolis. And after being here for a couple years, we decided that we were going to get a get-together of firefighters that think the same, believe in the brotherhood, believe in training. And so we kind of had a little get together in the basement of the Hampton, and thank God the fire marshal wasn't on duty that night. I was slightly overfilled. And that from there, when Bobby Halton became editor-in-chief, we connected together and did some things together and have carried on. We have a large bash again tonight here at FDIC. Sponsored by Fire Engineering and along with the FOOLS, the Indy Metro FOOLS, the proud sponsors of that also. And just the brotherhood, the voice of the brotherhood has spread on over the years, and just continue on what our job's about. And you know, training, we always, the FOOLS have always been founded around training and promoting training and getting the proper training for our brothers and sisters. And promoting the brotherhood and sisterhood of the fire service. Our fire service, as some of us older guys know, that the fire service is changing rapidly, just as the rest of America is. So that we want to keep those important topics live with the fire service. There's many different avenues you can go, but we've already stuck to training, brotherhood, and sisterhood of the fire service, and pride, honor, and tradition.
awesome. As we go along, I'd like the other guys to introduce themselves, you know, your position with the organization, who you are, where you're from.
Okay, I'm Bob Foss, Vice President of FOOLS International, career firefighter with Montgomery County Fire Rescue, Montgomery County, Maryland. Just good week to get out here. Good time, chance to recharge batteries and get to spend time with each other, you know, as well as people who are like-minded and want to be active and involved in the fire service.
My name is Ben Flagel. I'm the secretary for the e-board. I worked for University Fire Department in Fairbanks, Alaska. Been with the FOOLS since about 2003. And being here we're in Indy. Just got here.
Long way from Alaska.
Being here is, for me, is all about meeting some of the 7,500 plus members we have, and that have created and maintained over 185 chapters that are currently active. So if you're wanting to just make contact with the e-board and ask some questions about running your chapter, we'll be around at the Brotherhood Bash tonight, and just be glad to shake some hands and get to know some folks that I've talked to on the phone or through email for some time.
I'm Chris Bednarek. I'm the treasurer for FOOLS International, and I'm from Chicago Heights, Illinois, about a half hour south of Chicago. I've been career there for 19 years, been with Fools since 2004 with the Southside Fools. And just to reiterate what everyone else has been saying, it's just good to be able to see this group of guys that we only get to see each other a couple times a year, see all the other members and all the other brothers and sisters that are here in Indianapolis for the week, and just spread the word of the brotherhood.
My name is Robbie Fisher. I'm the training educational chair for Fools International. Been part of the Fools organization since 2001. I'm a firefighter battalion chief with Snohomish County Fire District 7, which is north of Seattle. This is probably my 12th or 14th time coming to FDIC. And it's been, if you've never been, you've got to come, first of all. But it's an incredible experience. There has, as Bart said, there's been a real tight connection over the years, Fools and Penwell and FDIC. Coming out here, it's just incredible. We were talking earlier about how many Fools are instructors at FDIC, and there's not a way for us really to figure that out. But I can say every time I'm talking to another instructor, they're also part of a chapter. So there's a good number of Fools members that are doing the hot classes, that are doing the workshop classes if you've never been. And then through the rest of this week, Wednesday through Friday, we've got classroom sessions going on. And there's a number of Fools that are teaching those classroom sessions as well. So this is a great place for education and for learning. It's a great place for Fools.
Going on as we were talking about the Fools, why are we talking about Fools and why are we talking about FDIC? Well, our mission statement for the Fools organization is the Fools exemplify the true meaning of the brotherhood by providing training opportunities to the brothers and sisters, firefighters worldwide. We organize benefits to assist not only a firefighter and their families in need, but our communities as well. The Fools exist to strengthen the brotherhood of our chosen profession and fuel the flame of passion we have our calling. So we say brotherhood there, but it's sisterhood. Unfortunately, it's a common term we use, but the point is, that's what FDIC I think is about. I mean, I think the worst thing you can do is come to FDIC and just go out and go to bars and drink and hang out. You're coming to FDIC, there's so many training opportunities and so much you can bring back home. You don't want to do hands-on training because it costs to bring your gear. Or maybe there's a department rule about bringing gear to other training events without department approval. That's not a problem. There's so many other things to do here as far as classes you're going to sit in. Workshops, 4-hour ones, hour-and-a-half ones. There's so many different things. I mean, I'm already looking for what I'm going to sit in tomorrow morning when I actually have some free time. So I know for me, it kind of seems like FDIC is exactly what we do as an organization. FDIC provides training worldwide. I mean, provides training to firefighters everywhere. Kind of what we do. And it's ironic that you see many of the chapters have members actually be presenters here. We're very fortunate, I think, as a Fools organization, have a really good partnership with fire engineering, with Bobby Halton, with Penwell, with everyone that's been involved, because we have a blog talk radio show on Monday nights, about every fifth or Monday or something like that, every fourth, almost like every fifth Monday or a month and a half. So we would be able to have that opportunity. And because of those shows, we've had some pretty awesome things happen. We have some shows where we talk about mental health and resilience, and something we'll probably talk about a little bit here as well, where our chapter is going. And ironically, the keynote speaker today was a member of Southside Fools. With the chaplain that opened up the opening ceremony, say Father Jim, is our chaplain for Fools International. So it's a real strong parallel between what's going on with Rosecrans, the Florian program, those people in mental health, with FDIC, with fire engineering, with the guest speakers, and the Fools organization. It's pretty awesome to see that parallel. So it's pretty neat, I think. You guys jump in.
I'd add real quickly, when talking about the training, and Richie had mentioned there's a lot of classes being offered here, but when after the training, the fellowship, when we're all getting together, there's a ton more training that's going on. Just being able to run into people that, some of these instructors or these individuals have written these articles that you've read for years, and all of a sudden you're at an event or maybe the bar or pub, and there they are, and they're talking about, well, what do you think? They're talking about their topic, or they're debating an issue, be it combination versus smooth bore, PPV, whatever it is. But the training just doesn't stop when we leave, when we actually leave the convention center and move on. And that, I think that is one of the really cool things about about FDIC.
I would agree. I mean, I think it goes the same with why you joined the Fools. The benefit for us as Fools was the networking. None of us knew. I think Chris and I did. Chris and I knew each other from our local chapter, but the rest of us up here did not know each other until we met through the Fools organization. And it's just like going out teaching. We're doing hot classes this week, and there's students in there that are Fools members that you didn't meet. Now there are students in there that are going to maybe start a chapter, or there's students that are going to go back and bring that training back to the department. It kind of works hand in hand. The networking you get within our organization is exactly what you get when you come to FDIC. The networking, the resources. I think you bring up a great point. I think sometimes the students are intimidated to go up and talk to instructors like we're up on a pedestal, and we are absolutely not. We're all fellow brother and sister firefighters, and we should talk to each other. And
We're all students.
I think that's probably the coolest thing. I mean, I consider these guys close personal friends. I wouldn't have that if I didn't have this Fools organization. I've met people at FDIC that became close personal friends because of that.
Yeah, over the years, as FDIC continues to grow more and more, I'm not sure what the last I heard, they were expecting 34,000 firefighters in town. And I can remember when we first moved FDIC here, it wasn't nearly that. I think they were happy if they got 10,000 people in town. And over the years, it just keeps expanding and expanding. We're sitting here looking out the window at the show floor, and there's I can count 3 or 4 aerials set up and everything else. And not only does the FDIC bring the training, but a lot of the manufacturers bring out their new ideas and present them at FDIC before they even start selling it. So again, it's cutting edge technology that you can get at FDIC, and not only talking to the instructors or taking the classes and everything else. And kind of our little our heart class that we did Monday and Tuesday. The weather wasn't so great, but I mean, all the students were great. They all had smiles on their faces. They left our training grounds a little dirtier and hopefully a little smarter, but everybody had a smile on their face when they left there. And, you know, it's great to come here to be able to teach, you know, and pass on the brotherhood. But, you know, when a guy comes up and shakes your hand and says, thank you, that was great training, and, you know, I couldn't have got it anywhere else. It really means a lot, I know, to all of us as the instructors.
I thought the training was fine, the weather-wise. Was there an issue with the weather?
Oh,
Were you indoors?
I had the portion I was inside. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
he
right.
got a little overheated. They had to furnace up, you know. But we have it every year, and we have like a list of things you can't make up. And at our training site, Monday morning, just before the students arrived, we had a skunk come out of the burn building.
Yes, we did.
So,
And then being 2 skunks.
yes.
So
yes.
we weren't sure how that was going to go.
We worked around each other, and they went to go get them yesterday. But, you know, it's just goofy experiences like that we can all laugh and talk about. Hey, that's what happened last year at FDIC.
It's awesome.
What about talking about Rosecrans and our connection with Rosecrans?
Rosecrans. So Dan DeGrice, who met, ironically, FDIC at the Brotherhood Bash. I met Dan DeGrice at FDIC maybe every bit of 4 years ago. I knew him from my job, worked with him, didn't know him. We've seen each other, but didn't have that connection. Met him at FDIC, talked about Rosecrans, was an addiction and treatment facility out in Rockford. They have other offices elsewhere, other facilities, but that's their main facility. They have one for adolescents and one for adults. Well, they create a Florian program. The Florian program is for first responders as well as military. They're even getting police in it because there's really nothing for the police as well. So that's an organization that started having a treatment facility because we are different animals. Everyone is. Firefighters are different than police officers. Police officers, firefighters are different than the military. Everyone in where you work kind of have your own uniqueness. So it was hard, I think, for many firefighters to relate to a healthcare professional that didn't understand our humor, our world, our work environment, lack of sleep, waking up all of a sudden, going 100 miles an hour, the stress during your body, and how sometimes you carry that stuff home. I know from that talk, I always often said, I sometimes feel like I fit better at a firehouse than I do in my house at times at home, my wife and kids. It takes me a bit to get adjusted. I just fit with these guys. We're like-minded, same. Well, most of us are like-minded.
Most of us are tall.
Right. Yeah, not by much. Right. Maybe you brush the hair up. But so point is that they've created a program that was pretty awesome that wasn't out there before. And because of that, our whole e-board has gone the last 2 years to a symposium about mental health. wellness. I think we all can say we learned a lot about ourselves as well as firefighters and how they react to situations, how they build up stress, how it affects. And that's a group that we try to support regularly, and we have. And I don't know.
As a result, I've become a peer support member in my department, coordinate our peer support team, made connections. You know, all of us here on the e-board have had close friends, very close friends that have taken their own lives, and we've all been impacted in many different ways. And really, I think this is kind of like a real good program for the Fools to kind of hang their hat on and say, we're going to be committed to this for a while. And that's one of the things that we've always done as an organization, in addition to brother sisterhood and training and staying networked, is about, you know, taking care of one another and making so that, you know, we all can hopefully make it to the end of our careers and live a, you know, a really good life after, you know, life in the fire service. So it's a great organization for us to be connected.
I mean, it's kind of ironic too. I mean, keynote speaker today, where he worked, what he did, ties in. Bobby Halton's history. I mean, he's had to deal with stuff. Was part of the advisory panel at Rosecrans. I mean, just so much intertwining between us, Rosecrans, FDIC, that is similar to what organizations are doing, what we are doing, to training each other, looking out for each other. We probably lacked that looking out. I think we're finally catching up or getting on board where we were probably missing that one entity. So I mean,
it's making that transition, because looking out for each other always used to be watching out for each other on the fire ground. It was knowing building construction. It was knowing about tactics and strategy, making sure you had your PPE on. It wasn't watching out for each other at the firehouse.
Taking care of one.
Hey, man, that guy's sitting in the corner quiet by himself. Maybe something's going on. And just learning some of the recognizing the problem.
It's getting to the point now, and Dan covered it in his keynote speech, is that, you know, we're getting to the now in the fire service. It's okay to actually struggle through things and to, you know, look to your brother or sister and say, you know, I need a little bit of help here, or recognizing that one of our brothers or sisters is in trouble and going up to them saying, how are you today? What's going on? And seeing that and actually having a conversation. Whereas before, a lot of that was handled at, you know, around the beanery table or after shift. Is like, man, the first place I want to go now is go to the bar or the tavern and drink or whatever it may be, whatever they're. But now that's kind of changing, and we're starting to see us become, you know, more aware of the situation and taking care of one another.
Talk about FDIC for classes, FDIC for networking. You even said if you don't want to do that, no, go into the showroom floor, like the equipment that is here, the apparatus. You need something for your department, you'll find it here. There's nothing that you wouldn't need, whether you're in a hazmat, whether you're into water rescue or SOTP stuff. Even if you're into something with purchasing for apparatus or just your own equipment for yourself, I mean, you'll find it here. It's unbelievable. And the nice thing is, doesn't mean that's really the right tool. Now you can network with people here about, hey, have you ever used this axe? Ever used this wrench or this wedge? I want to get a metal wedge. Well, why? Because of this. And what's good, what isn't? Now you can actually talk to people who use it, kind of validate in their opinion why they would get something. So, I mean,
this is like the biggest kitchen table you're ever going to sit at.
Yeah.
You know, you go and you do your training, whether it's a hot class or a classroom, and it's like training at your firehouse. And then everybody knows the best training happens around the kitchen table. So the guys really open up and talk about things. And that's what this is.
apparatus floor.
Apparatus floor.
Apparatus floor or back of the
Yep.
rig, kitchen table. Those are the two.
And the other thing with all the equipment that's here, companies like Scott, when they're doing a big release, they wait to do their big release until FDIC. And it's because there's so many people here, be it that it's Scott or any other manufacturer. So when you come out, I mean, I remember the first time I came to FDIC and trying to walk the entire exhibit floor is literally impossible to do in one day unless you're just going to like wave everybody and just keep on moving.
Yeah.
And if you're bumping into people as you're going, you start talking.
Try going with these guys. They keep stopping and talking.
Yeah,
Can't
yeah.
get through the door.
Oh, Timmy,
Scanner boxes.
Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad. I only Ben and Bob really talking about Ben. You got something to add there? I mean,
Well, you jumped topics there. I mean, just before.
so you're right. We'll retract back. I mean, 3M and Scott won't care that if we jump topics. They're just glad we're here. And so go ahead.
I was just going to say that we have a reputation as the traditionalists in the fire service. leather helmets and long mustaches. And being fools, we're into that hardcore part of the fire service. So I think it's a fantastic position for us to be in, to be talking about firefighter mental health, and it puts that topic in amongst some of the people that are going to be the most aggressive, and in the crowd that tends to keep all that stuff bottled up, and that information is right where it needs to be. So we've been going on about it for well over a year now, and we're going to keep making that message louder. So that's what was on my mind when you suddenly started talking about the show on the floor.
Yeah, move quick here. Let's not last. Move quick here.
Come on, Bob.
We got Bob.
No, I think a lot of it's what we talked about. Just like when the first declaring a Mayday came out. Everybody was afraid to call a Mayday because you fear what your brothers and sisters are going to say around the kitchen table. That's a lot of that. What we're seeing now here is asking for help. Everybody's that apprehension or that hesitation on what are people going to think of me. If I have to reach out for help, but
Well,
like
it's
these
kind
guys
of
have said,
a personal Mayday, if you want to call
Right.
it that.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yep.
A lot of people are afraid to call that personal Mayday.
With that type A personality the majority of the fire service holds, we're always there to help other people and not necessarily be the ones that need the help. And that's becoming more and more prevalent. As time goes on in fire service, we need that help as well.
And I think a big stumbling block is once you realize you need help, even if you're the company officer taking care of one of your members, in a lot of parts of the country, getting help is very, very difficult because one, you don't really know what the problem is or what type of doctor you need, what kind of counseling you need. And then when you break into the world of mental health, they're not all cookie cutter folks. There are many, many different psychologists, many, many different types of counselors. They all have different orientations, and their focus is very different depending on what the patient needs. And you can do harm by giving them the wrong treatment. You can stall their healing by getting them the wrong treatment. So that's one of the next steps that I think we should take as a FO.O.L.S organization and we've begun so with those grants, but trying to funnel people in the right direction as they ask for help.
I mean, I don't know, just question here for you guys, because I'm a hypocrite. I'm guilty of it. How many here wrote an article for fire engineering? Well, Robbie has. How many presented here at the FDIC? How many have you ever taught here at the FDIC? And I just started a year or two. So making my pledge right here now to either present next year.
Another famous Richie Stack challenge.
And or write an article, one of the two.
Or be fire engineering training minutes.
What's that? Just kidding.
I think Mark has a recent one.
Yes. Yep. So,
yeah. That's if I say anything about the magazine is I love the articles I hate or I disagree because it gives me something to debate about. It's a discussion at a FO.O.L.S meeting or a training topic. Like, this is what this guy wrote this. Not saying it, but I think this because of that. Now you can debate, okay? Or you pull some argument you never would have thought of and actually pick up some good hints. So articles I dislike the most are the ones I really do like because it makes me think, it challenges you. So
I just thought it's odd that you said you like to debate stuff.
I thought it was weird.
why do you say that? Oh my God, time up already. Well, let's thank 3M, Scott, Fire and Safety for this opportunity here today.
I think, I know as we're tying up, I think James Jonson is supposed to be coming in. James is going to be he does a building construction class, and James is also a FO.O.L., and they just started their new chapter, an international chapter,
Yes.
up in Vancouver. I think they're called the Rain City Fools. Is that what
Yes. Rain City FO.O.L.S.
So that just kind of backs up exactly what we were just talking about. There's a lot of FO.O.L.S that are a part of this big machine that's running, and we're real proud of everybody that participates and helps out, and so we'll be at the bash.
The Brotherhood Bash tonight starts at 5 o'clock at the Pavilion. Chief Honkin will be there, our chaplain, Jim Swarthout will be there, and a lot of other people. So hope to see you come out. They raise money to give it to good causes. So hope to see you tonight and hope to see you somewhere out and around at the convention itself. So thanks for your time. Thank you for allowing us to be here today.
Thanks for tuning in to Fire Engineering Talk Radio. for tuning into Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Each week, our hosts will introduce you to a various cast of characters you will only find here. Each host will share experience, knowledge, and expertise regarding the fire service. Allowing you to call and speak with them live. Your experience you can only find on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy and stay safe.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Built Environment Live at FDIC 2018. I want to give a big shout out to 3M Scott Fire and Safety. They're a proud sponsor of Fire Engineering's Trusted Voices radio show. So big thank you to them for hosting. Today is going to be pretty casual, and I have Chief Jerry Tracy with us, and then we have Chris Boddy also from New York. So I'll let those guys introduce themselves. We're just going to talk a little bit about high-rise, a little bit of standpipe stuff, and kind of all related to the built environment, kind of understanding the systems that we work with. So, Chief, you want to?
How do you do? Well, I was delighted to be invited to this segment to say high-rise. High-rise interests me in many aspects. The challenge of it, and the fact that Chris is joining us today is also a privilege for all of us, to tell you the truth. Because he certainly worked in the high-rise canyons of Manhattan, and he also understands the challenges, and he brings a lot to the table as well.
Thank you, Chief.
So,
thank you for inviting me. High-rise is where I work in Manhattan was our bread and butter operation. So we needed to make sure that it was done smoothly. This is the type of fire where you don't really get a second chance, and based on construction, can really make or break an operation. You can't stick your head out a window when you're running low on air, and typically they're very big footprints. We operated in buildings where the floor space was a block by a block. So search ropes, thermal imaging cameras, good location of fire, or finding the seat of the fire, and then stretching to it is essential to the way we operate.
Right.
In essence, what was said between the lines, he was discussing disciplines. In the high-rise environment, you have to have certain disciplines, and these are things that you want to make sure. I mean, certain people might call it dotting the I's, crossing the T's, but it's all in your size up. And coming from squad companies, so we were a special unit. When we responded, or we were called to respond to high-rise fires, our size up one coming into the building, most certainly we would hear information that was pre-planned information, giving you the high area size type of construction, fire resistant for the most part. High-rise buildings are either built of steel, they may be concrete, reinforced concrete, they could be a hybrid. And today, Vancouver being the latest, fly scraper, which is basically CLT and or heavy timber, things like that. We could talk about that as a separate subject, but understanding building construction, understanding the weaknesses of those of that type of construction. Just last night, I was traveling here in Indianapolis to see a brand new building being constructed, high-rise in steel, and was amazed to see that the floor supports was lightweight steel truss holding up corrugated steel panels. And that sort of had taken me back somewhat. But to say all of these disciplines, it's disciplines in size up. The squad couldn't make sure there was no water issues, that the first two engine had a primary water supply, that the system was being supplied, that there was no issues of water up on the fire floor, let's say, with low pressures or no water, things like that. And then from there, understanding exactly, he said, where is the fire? Have they found the fire yet? But sometimes it could be a small condition within a zone. They haven't actually found the fire yet. You don't stretch a line until you know where the fire is. It's like we don't serve wine before it's time. Knowing exactly where the fire is, and having that, it's not just we have a fire on the 6th floor. That's not good enough. It's fire on the 6th floor, but where? Is it in the 1-2 corner, the CD corner, things like that? because you'll have units that are ordered to the floor above for search. Now, and we're talking about not the residential arena. We're talking about a business arena, large open office area space. So the unit, because I mean, to say when it's the residential, you know it, you'll go to the exact department above, 16J, 17J. But in the office arena, you have to tell me exactly where the fire is, because if I'm going to the floor above, I'm going immediately to that area to see if I have fire extension now.
Right.
Because if I start searching the floor and I don't get to that area but for 5 or 10 minutes, the fire may be, you know, at some point in time beyond the efficiency of a handling. But if I see it's extending right now, I can inform the incident commander. It's put on the radio where everyone's informed of the danger. So these are disciplines, all disciplines, and thanks for sharing.
So for maybe some of the listeners that don't know how the squad company, how does that, what would be your guys' role in, say, a high-rise fire, rolling up as the squad?
So in a squad company in the city of New York is kind of a catch-all. The concept has been around for a long time, but in 1998, the city wanted to augment the hazmat capability. Chief Tracy, then Captain Tracy, became the founder of Squad 18, the founding captain of Squad 18, where I worked for a long time. I'm now over in Squad 1 in Brooklyn. But the concept is first, second, and third due response area, we operate as an engine. Anything beyond that in our response area, we operate as a special operations unit. So our goal is to solve problems. We fill in the gaps. We're not there to steal a line or you know, be doing anything any differently than what anybody else is. Our operation technique is to see where things can be improved upon and fill that gap. And you know, regarding high-rise, especially in high-rise commercial buildings, I can recall an incident. We had 120 Broadway down in Lower Manhattan, a very large, older construction building. I want to say it was built in the late 70s. Very, very large layout. The initial alarm came in as a class 3 or class E alarm, which was a 1 or 2 company response. The first due truck got there. They got up to the fire floor or where they reported alarm was going off, and they actually had smoke. That's unusual. You know, how many times do we go to an activated fire alarm and it's nothing? We got there, and basically in about 7 minutes, we had the fire located. But the entire floor was banged down, floor to ceiling. Literally, when I started with the search rope, I anchored in what I thought was a clean area. We started doing a search with thermal imaging camera following the heat currents. We ended up locating the fire. We were easily 150 feet in because I came in on my search rope. We called for a line. We said we had a fire. We had the location of the fire, follow the search rope in. At this point, you know, we've been operating where our vibro alerts are going off. So we basically, you know, that was the end of our operation at that moment.
Yeah.
We started making our way out. We exchanged information with Rescue 1 at the time, told them where the fire was. They made their way with the line, directing them how to get there. We went and changed bottles, but the interesting thing was the area that I thought I tied off in was like a sky lobby to an elevator bank. That was now floor to ceiling smoke as well.
Yeah.
So the one thing I learned out of this whole thing was, you know, tie back to that stairwell. You know, start your search rope at that stairwell. At least you're going to get back to a point of safety. I wasn't thinking at the time. I saw the door. I looked at the door. It was pitch black. Well, that meant smoke. And I tied off right past the door, thinking I'm good.
Right.
And conditions deteriorated. Fire was free burning. I had been burning for at least 20 minutes. I think we were 23 minutes into it when we found the fire from the initial alarm. And pretty large size, a lot of cubicles, you know, all the things that we teach in large area search. You don't move fast when you're looking for that type of fire.
I thank you for sharing the very fact that you learned a lesson and you felt that that was an issue, meaning You should have started your search, let's say, from the stairwell.
Sure.
That's your means of egress. It's a protected area. And thank you for being honest. I'd like to also ask you this, because you notice he also mentioned that by the time they found the fire, they were running out of air.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? If I was, let's say, the fire sector supervisor and or the incident commander, I should be heads up enough to understand these firefighters when they're running out of air.
Right.
I tend to use a rule of thumb, let's say 10 minutes. And everybody has different cardiovascular capabilities, things like that. And I go with a 10-minute rule to say I have to have a unit here ready, and in this case, evidently Rescue 1 was there along with some other units, ready to go in and relieve them, because they have to have a time element of, there's an exchange of information on that relief, and then they have to have enough time to make it to fresh air, meaning based upon the time given them, which is now 33% of your air bottle. But I'd like to ask you another question, because it was quite interesting in that he said it was back down to the floor. But he mentioned using his thermal imaging camera. And he mentioned that in the thermal imaging camera, he saw heat currents. I'd like to ask you this. If you did not have that thermal imaging camera, do you think the movement of the smoke would have given you any indication of where that fire was?
At that moment, there was no movement of smoke. It was just contained. It was like you took a bag and like a clear plastic bag and filled it up with black smoke. That was it. It's just,
sprinklers?
yeah, there's not a lot of sprinklers in New York City. The fire code didn't dictate it. Now I believe it does, I think for residential and even some commercial buildings. But at the time, this building did not have sprinklers. Part of finding the fire, not only with the thermal imaging camera, was I heard a broken water pipe and you could hear the water running. And at that time, I looked up at the camera when I got to a rough area. I looked up and I had, red over our heads, but it was zero visibility, floor to ceiling. It wasn't hot. It was just smoky.
And I asked that for a reason, because now you're talking about a large open area. Generally, the ceiling height in office buildings, the ceiling height may be 12, 14 feet. In other words, the drop ceiling, and this drop ceiling is higher than 8 feet, but above this drop ceiling is a plenum. That plenum is used for the air return.
Absolutely.
So the heat from the fire, again, when a detector goes off in a high-rise building, HVAC systems, heating, air conditioning, ventilation systems are, well, according to codes and standards, is to shut down. And that's NFPA 92. But anyway, shut down, which would mean now the air in that building is stagnant.
Exactly.
It's not moving. So unless, and there may be some, let's say, authorities having jurisdiction and/or jurisdictions that an HVAC system will shut down, but yet the fire floor, they'll allow it to exhaust, but at very low CFM, which again is really not going to draw the fire. In other words, you're not going to be able to go in and start a search and all of a sudden say, oh, wow, look at the movement of that smoke. It's coming from there, so the fire has to be in that. You're not going to get that. But with a tick, you'll get a better identification of heat currents and things like that. But again, going back to an incident commander, you've got to be prepared to relieve these firefighters, because 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing too, as firefighters, if we say just our normal residential fire, we typically we look at the building like it's potentially deteriorating as the fire goes. But when we look at a high-rise setting, it's like we have to rely on the standpipe system. We have to rely on the clean stairwells and the air returns and all that, which is kind of an interesting. It's like almost a flip-flop in your mindset when you go from certain things. That makes sense.
Europe, and we're talking about standpipe systems and things like that, and that's North America. We operate with, of course, Europe has standpipe systems, but they don't put out the quantity of water that we require here in North America, according to NFPA 14 and 25, things like that. Whereas we believe in utilizing extinguishing equipment, hose, nozzles, and for those departments that actually fight these fires, they like to go with high flow, low pressure equipment. High flow, low pressure, meaning the standpipe system itself, all it is plumbing.
Absolutely.
What do we show up with? Portable plumbing. hose and nozzles, it's portable plumbing, that's all it is. So, I mean, it's not a perfect world. Building may very well have a fire pump, but there are many departments that their policy is, even though that building has a fire pump, when we show up with pumpers and engine apparatus, we'll augment the system as a matter of policy. For the fact that it's not a perfect world. Right. If it was a perfect world, there'd be no reason to have fire departments.
Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. So when you, for you guys with your system, who will connect into the FDC and all that? Would that be, is that your the first two, second two?
First two engine, I believe it's a policy, the first two engine chauffeur should connect to the standpipe to the Siamese.
Okay.
And I believe it goes on a hierarchy. Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. It's standpipe first, and then combination sprinkler standpipe would be the next, and then last would be the sprinkler. Our goal is to make sure that we have a good water supply first and foremost for our firefighting tactics. Sprinklers are nice, but I can put out fires without sprinkler systems. We do it every day. Yeah. So I don't necessarily want to augment a sprinkler. I want to augment our firefighting capabilities, and that would be the standpipe.
Question came up yesterday as well. What's your choice? Fire department connection for a sprinkler or standpipe? And the hands went up, oh, I'd connect to that sprinkler system first. Well, let's put it this way. The building is designed with an automatic sprinkler system, so it has a water supply. Somehow, if it's a high rise, there's tanks, there's pressure tanks or gravity tanks. And that system should have operated if in fact it fused ahead. Could the fire be shielded, whereas it's not going to be fully extinguished? Possible. So, okay, if firefighters have to enter that building to completely extinguish something, now, certainly the occupants' lives in the buildings are important, but those firefighters' lives are important. So we'll charge and augment that standpipe system first for their efficiency and safety, and then the sprinkler system will be augmented thereafter.
I've been to many fires where the fire is either above the sprinkler system, traveling around in the plenum where the sprinkler head, it's not effective.
Yeah.
A sprinkler is nice in the principle for what they're designed for and protection of lives and property. But having been to more fires than not when they've been activated, they actually become a hindrance to us. Right. It's bogging us down. The smoke is now becoming steam. It's not lifting. It's just creating more problems. You'll hear a lot of the times guys get that sprinkler shut down, or chief can get the sprinkler system shut down because it's not helping us locate that fire. It's changing the dynamics of the smoke.
That cold smoke stuff makes it so difficult to navigate.
Exactly. So while sprinklers are nice and they do have a very good purpose, especially for the initial protection of life, allows people to be able to hopefully evacuate their apartment or their area. For us, we're very effective in the job that we do if we have a good hose line.
Right. You mentioned before we come into the room talking about codes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure. Do you believe, or do you think that the fire service understands? We're talking about the fire service in general. Do they understand that codes are really only written, all of those requirements, for the safety of people to evacuate a building to get out? In other words, the building should last that long for people to remove themselves in the building, but the codes aren't written for us that are going to stay long after these people are out to fight this fire. So they're not written for us. They're only written for the occupants and their evacuation.
This is something that 2 weeks ago I was out in Ottawa, that's where our capital is, and we had a legislative conference, and I met with a whole bunch of members of Parliament, because that's one of our things is in our National Building Code of Canada, firefighters are lumped in as building occupants. We don't have any considerations outside. We're in the International Building Code. If something comes up, you can put in a proposal or you can put in a rejection based on being firefighters, and that's, safety. But in Canada, we don't have any of that. So that's what we've been lobbying for, is to say, we just want a seat at the table, because exactly like you said, Chief, yes, those systems are designed to that 2 or 3 minutes for those people to leave, whereas that's when we're coming in at 4 to 5 minutes and then trying to go to work.
So now you're talking about building construction. So moving in on, let's say, a fire in a large open office area, granted, the water, how we would like to extinguish this fire, you may want to put water on the structure itself so that it doesn't become compromised. And I give the analogy that you respond to a gasoline tanker overturned down on the highway, and it happens to be underneath an overpass that's built of steel, and the flames are exposing the steel.
Absolutely.
Where would you want to put your water?
On that.
Exactly.
Protecting our exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's something I don't think a lot of people think about. Like, you see a lot of people that'll think about like non-combustible materials, and they don't think it's a risk in a lot of cases. But like, you know, cooling, like doing active work to cool the structural members and that stuff is something that's super important, especially if you have unprotected, you know, like that building you're talking about, lightweight steel trusses or under the Q decking, all that stuff.
Heavy steel, 280 Park Avenue was a fire many years ago in 1993. It happened on Super Bowl Sunday. Whereas very large steel horizontal beams, things like that, twisted and turned. I mean, building number 7 on 9/11 was a moment frame structure of steel that because it was left to burn, we were very busy with the pile. We weren't going to fight that far. But it caused the horizontal beams to, one, expand, elongate, and at their connections fail, whereas that allowed then long, tall, slender columns, and it was column number 79, that failed, is why that building pancaked. So that's the point, on protecting the structural elements. And that holds true even with concrete. Mm-hmm. And operating your hose line well out ahead of you, because if there's any moisture in that concrete at all, you'll have explosives falling, and you wouldn't want to be under it when it falls.
I think something interesting too with high-rise construction is people don't think about there being differences. Like when the Grenfell Towers, when that tragedy happened, there's so many people that were like, that building burnt for whatever it was, 24 hours or whatever, that heavy. And you know, then people would compare it to collapses that have happened, like Building 7, that were steel buildings. They can both be compromised, but they react drastically different under fire conditions.
We just had a fire in the Trump building. I wasn't working for it, obviously, but they had a fire in the Trump building, I believe last week, 2 weeks ago. And you know, the occupants of the building were saying, well, we didn't know what to do because the elevators weren't working. Well, there are these things called stairwells, and that's, you know, the elevators, let the firemen use those. I pray every time we go to a high-rise building, the elevators are working, because to walk up 22 flights of stairs and then start operating, it's difficult at best. But one of the things I can say that we took out of the Trump fire, and there's a lot of investigation that still has to be done, a lot of studies, is that you know, the first due engine did a great job. They got the line stretched out of the stairwell, off the standpipe. They got it to the front door. When they got the door open, they had a heavy amount of fire behind that front door. It was you know, a large volume of fire. And again, how long does it take you in a smoky environment to do that? Yeah. You know, the first due engine, again, I can't speak enough about the work that they did. They got that line in place. They started running out of air. The second due engine, same thing. They had numerous reports of people trapped, so the trucks were busy doing searches. They couldn't get into the apartment. And at that point in time, you know, they turned the line over to Rescue One and other companies to make a push into the apartment. It took a lot of cooling to get that volume of fire down. They said that the ceilings were incredibly high, large amount of fire, and they don't know exactly when the windows failed. They don't know if it was after they started that line into the front door of the apartment or after or before. So that could have been tremendously different had there been a wind-affected fire there. Those guys could have been seriously burned. You know, that's a whole different topic that you can get into. But the thing I bring up is understand that a high-rise fire, you got to have a lot of companies ready to go. You know, because we only have so much working time to get that line into place. And that first line is the most important thing. They had 3 lines stretched. 2 lines on the fire floor, 1 on the floor above for potential auto exposure. And the concern was because they had to fire out the windows and they didn't know what the windows were going to do on the floor above. But understand that first line is the most essential line that we can get. I've been to numerous fires that get put out with that first line, and you never need any of the additional lines. So teaming your engine companies, having a second set of, the third, the fourth, the fifth new engine ready to go in a good area, the floor below, is key to getting these fires put out.
Awesome.
The public and the media, newspapers, will make assumptions based upon that fire. And you heard him say that a woman came out and she said the elevators weren't working. Well, they're not supposed to work. And where I'm coming from is those people, and that's a high-end, of course, high-end apartments. And I responded to that building. I know that the neighborhood very well. I know that building. And I know the mindset of the people that live in the high-end apartments, because we had the Lionel Hampton fire right across the street from Lincoln Center many years ago, for which right after that fire, I tried to, and we offered, and it was free of charge to the tenants of the building, fire safety training, if you will, because the management also gave fire safety training and papers as to this is what we expect you to do in the building. That portion of Trump Tower was not sprinkler protected because it wasn't required when it was built in 1984. So we can't say that, oh, Trump doesn't believe in fire safety. It just wasn't required. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And the management does believe in fire safety. They do hand out literature as to what these people should do and what to expect in fires and emergencies. To say, here we were trying to offer the tenants of One Lincoln Plaza fire safety education, and there was more than, let's say, 400 units in the building. 12 people showed up. 12 people showed up. So they're the ones that'll complain.
Right. Yeah, it's your fault.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, we're holding up Chief Duffy, Chief Avillo here. So just want to thank you guys so much for coming on the show. It's awesome being able to do this here live at FDIC. Chief, you taught yesterday in class.
Yes.
Yeah, went well. And what do you, Chris, what are you doing here?
We have a booth here, Rescue Products International. We design life safety products for the fire service, from escape systems to we have a standpipe simulator now. This is one of the things that we don't do a lot of training on.
Right.
We stretch lines off of engines, but when was the last time we charged an actual standpipe and stretched off the standpipe? So one of the things we have now is a simulator we can either bring to your department or sell to you to simulate real standpipe operations. So
awesome. And I have my classes tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. What's Hiding Behind the Walls, rooms 107, 108. So if anyone's here and listening in, I'd love to have you join us. And again, thank you to 3M, Scott Fire Safety for hosting the talk. So thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
23, I need to correct this address, but you have a fire in a one-story
Hey, welcome to FDIC edition of Fireground Strategies and Other Stuff from the Street. We're here today with Chief Flood, Chief Avillo, and myself, Jim Duffy, Battalion Chief, at the annual FDIC radio show. This is the greatest week every year for me. It's exciting. We have great things going on. This year, we have some new sponsors for the radio show, 3M and Scott Fire Safety. We're grateful that they helped put this on so we can get this message out to you guys while you're here. I'll let these two guys introduce themselves before we get going on the show. Chief Flood, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here this year.
Actually, this is my first year here, and I must say that I'm really impressed. It's a wonderful operation. The opening ceremony this morning was like stimulating, to say the least, and the layout and the way this thing is run is amazing, and the quality of instructors and the enthusiasm of the students is surpassed any kind of belief I had in what it was going to be. And me, I'm from New Jersey, North Hudson Regional, the third largest fire department in the state of New Jersey. I retired in 2003. I came on the job in 1973 when the fire triangle was just a fire V, and water was just H1O. So, yeah, I've been around a while, but I'll let Anthony introduce himself now.
How's everybody going out there? Anthony Avillo here, retired deputy North Hudson Regional. Partners here with my pal Jim Duffy on this radio show. Really happy to be out here at the FDIC again, Disneyland for firefighters. And to just reiterate Chief Flood's words, it's a battery charger. The enthusiasm and the motivation behind everybody here is just beyond belief. And if you have never been here, you need to be here because this is the place to be if you're a firefighter and you're looking to train.
It's really beautiful to see like a nationwide and a worldwide attendance. There's people from Canada, there's people from other countries, and all over the United States, and everybody is different, but everybody is exactly the same.
I have to echo that. I agree with him. Firefighters are firefighters, especially the firefighters that come to FDIC. Nobody is here because they were ordered to be. Everybody here is on their own time. In a lot of cases, their own dime. They're paying their own freight to get here. The hotel, the airfare, whatever it costs them to get here. And like you said, for people around the world, I had someone from Saudi Arabia in my class on Monday morning and a guy from England in my class. We had a great interaction, myself and the guy from England, the high pressure and all that. We had a great conversation.
This is a monument to dedication. Like the firefighters are like just the best people in the world, the most out. It's a job that's one of the few truly altruistic endeavors. And every time you go to work, the only reason that you go to work is to help people. And the kind of grace that brings you as a human being is amazing. And yeah, it's really as Anthony says, a battery charger. I'm like, I was full of enthusiasm and a feeling for the job again. I've been off the job since 2003, so I don't even know why anybody's talking to me now.
Coming back?
Nobody wants me back either.
Trust me. I have to introduce something. You guys, you came out with a new book.
Yeah.
Correct? Both of you guys got together, wrote a book called
Full Contact Leadership.
Right. Full Contact Leadership.
Tell us about it and tell you why you wrote it, number one, and number two, what it can do for our listeners.
Well, I always felt that Chief Flood was my mentor through my whole career. He was. I got on a job. He was my first captain. Well, not my first captain, but very close to my first captain. But we were in the same firehouse. He was the ladder captain snarling at us from across the floor when I was on the engine. But eventually I got to his company, and he was one rank ahead of me all the way through, and always kept me in check and maybe the person I was. But I always felt that his philosophies on leadership were like none I've ever heard before. And although, as you expand your horizons to places like this, you do hear some of that stuff coming from people, but I always felt it was very unique. And, before he really became irrelevant, of it. I wanted to get this in print. So I started writing, and I wrote a real lot, and I gave it to him, and he said, I don't know how people read your stuff. You can't write. So he sort of got motivated, took it and melded our stuff together, and really, really proud of the book. I've done the strategies book, but this leadership book is like, the icing on the cake. And I think everybody, we've gotten nothing but great feedback on it. So, thank you, Chief.
So tell us what, like you have an opening statement in the book, or you give a little short preface in the book. Can you tell us what that was about?
Well, I don't know exactly what you're talking about because I haven't read the book. But the thing with the book was, I think it said that there are a lot of leadership books out there, and they have a lot of great information. And anybody that's aspiring to or is an officer or a leader in the fire service has a has a responsibility to chase information, to find out how to improve himself, because especially a captain, the captain is the contact point between the SOPs, the policies, the procedures, the chief, and all the big thinking and the firefighters. All that the fire department is translated to the companies through the company officers. So that's the key. And the other philosophy is that leadership training starts the first day you enter the job. As soon as you raise your hand, while you're raising your hand, you should see the ceremony as a indication of what you're stepping into. And the other thing that I had read a lot of management books. Nobody would think I did, but I read a lot of management books, and I was always like put off by management, the idea. I thought it was way beyond what too esoteric. But I read them, and they were really, really beneficial for me. I had a mentor, Frank Constantinople, the chief of the Jersey City Fire Department, and Gerald Ulby, the chief of the Weehawken Fire Department. They took me under their wing and roughed me up and calmed me down. But now I lost my train of thought.
So yeah,
huh?
That's what happens.
That's what happens. I don't have a thought.
Hang out with Avillo.
No. What was I talking about?
Talking about Ulby and Constantinople.
No, before that. Oh yeah,
management books.
Yeah, management books. Yeah, I can see why. In 14 years. Anyway, the one thing I found in the management books, there was no way to translate it into the street, down into the firehouse. There was no information except for the greatest leadership book ever written. Winning the Leadership Game in the Fire Service by Hugh Caulfield was the most important and seminal leadership book I ever read. And it changed my idea, my approach, and it was really an eye-opener. And I think that we were aspiring, and we certainly fell short, to create a book like that, but for today, and yeah.
What a great idea. That book was one of the first books I got. I bought it in the 1980s. And it's so real and down to earth. The stories they tell about fire. That book's out of print now.
Yeah.
If you try to find it online, it can cost you over $100.
No, $1,300.
Oh, I found but I bought it for $17 back in the 1980s. I still have that book, Hugh Caulfield, and it's called Winning the Fire Service Leadership Game. Right. And he gives stories of like a captain calling up the chief going, I think they're going to kill me.
Right. But it was a special projects officer that the department would send to troubled firehouses, and he would straighten them out.
Yeah.
But he would rat on.
And he was just a captain.
He was a lieutenant.
I was a lieutenant.
Yeah. He would, but he told the story. Yeah, he ratted everybody out, but it was so well done, and his insights were so valuable, and they were like scalpels. He got right to the heart of the problem.
Yeah, it was definitely an influential book for me. It was given to me when I was promoted to captain by Chief Ulbig, and it definitely changed the way I saw things. And I always, I still have the book, but whenever I had a new captain as a chief, whenever I had a new captain, I would make him read that book. And what I should have done, and I thought about it later, was every captain that read that should have put their name in that book. Because I'm gonna tell you, probably 20 guys, easy 20 guys read that book while I had it. Some of them I had to chase down to get the book back, and threaten their lives. But just a tremendous book. And our book, I think, is we're trying to put the importance on the firefighter as the soft asset, the human asset, the departments, and again, Chief F.O.O.L.S will say that the departments spend tons of money on apparatus, equipment, training of firefighters, but very, very little money on the maintenance of the human assets and actually how to be an officer. One of the things I hear from a lot of people is, I got to be an officer. And I said, well, what kind of training did you have? Well, we don't have any training program. So, officer training for the most part in the country, with the exception of, places like maybe FDNY is trial and error, and error. And I think what we're trying to do with that book, and then with our class that we're doing Thursday, is sort of give some insight and some formula on management and soft assets. So, soft assets being the human resources of fire department.
The most valuable and most important and most integral piece of equipment in the fire service is the firefighter, and it's received the least amount of attention and funds. And one of the things that we continually do in the book is talk about supporting leadership. You have to actually support it. If the organization isn't embracing the idea of like full contact leadership, for lack of a better term, but they're not doing the department any good, and they're wasting the energies of good men and women that want to do good and do the right thing. And the other thing that we talk about is like how the soft environment, we talk about the hard and soft environment. The soft environment is where you come to the hard environment from, right? So the soft environment is like the pre-hard environment. And if you're not dealing with the soft environment activities and issues, your fireground and harder environment operation will mirror what you do like in the firehouse. Your leadership skills are more important in the soft zone than they are in the hard zone, because the hard zone, we know, like there's policies, SOPs, procedures, apparatus, there's all kinds of people telling you what to do minute by minute, they're guiding the whole operation. But when you go back to the firehouse, you're kind of like free associating. And you build your firemen in the firehouse. And it's a big challenge being an officer if you accept the challenge. If you don't accept the challenge, it's not a challenge. It's just a decoration for your lapel.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's a responsibility too. It's an absolute responsibility. And the keynote today proved that the fire service is starting to look at our people. It took us long. When I got promoted to my first level company officer position, everything was about strategy and tactics. And we need to know strategy and tactics. We absolutely do. Now I'm responsible for 3 guys sitting behind me on the engine. And then I became a battalion chief. Now I'm responsible for a whole shift. Mm-hmm. And I've received, I'm into training. I go training everywhere. I go to FDIC, I go to seminars because I'm hungry. And the reason I'm hungry is, first of all, some of it's me, but some of it's because my partner doesn't give me in. They teach me, oh, hey, we got a new engine. Let's train everybody on the new engine. But let's train Jim Duffy. Talk about the kid that has a drug problem, or the kid who is just so negative all the time. He's spewing negative stuff at the kitchen table every day. How can I change that? I mean, I've learned over the years, but the department gave me zero training. How do I deal with a negative firefighter that's impacting the entire shift? I've learned, because, like I said, because I've come to FDIC and I go to other conferences. I go to state schools. But again, even the state schools are very weak on the leadership side, strategy and tactics. It's the hands-on stuff, it's the touchy stuff. Do you agree? Same thing with you?
Absolutely.
Did you get
there's very few sort of prescriptions for action for this type of activity, for these type of things. And so people just wing it, so, and that gets people in trouble. And, as Chief said, and leadership, competency, discipline, they come out of the firehouse just like every tool that we use on a fire ground. If that's not coming out of the firehouse, it can't just magically show up on the fire ground because it's not being nurtured and developed in the 95% of the time that you're, in some departments, 98% of the time that you're in that soft environment. That's where all that stuff has to take root in order for it to, you to be successful once you get out, into the real deal world. Sounds good.
I always held to a philosophy that, well, you know how they say people start to look like their dogs and the dogs start to look like the people? Well, in my experience, every fire department looked exactly like the chief. Every battalion looked exactly like the battalion chief. Every company was exactly what the captain was. So if you were, a mutt, your people were mutts. If you were a thoroughbred, so you have, and you talk about responsibility. The responsibility is required. You're mandated to meet the measure of the job, right? No matter how much training you have, because when things go bad, the machinery to discipline or negatively discipline, or because that's what they have. If you don't have positive discipline in the form of training, education, group support, all you have is negative discipline to handle out. So that's why you see so many departments drowning in paperwork, describing all the things that people are doing wrong. They never get to addressing the issues, and it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to be a leader. It takes a lot of, and you were talking about your department didn't support you.
They didn't train you.
That's supporting you.
Yes.
No, they have to support you, and if you're not supported, they can't expect anything from you, but they do expect everything. From you. So, and I don't mean that, because I'm not about complaining. I threw complainers out the door. If you came to me with a complaint, you had to come to me with a solution. So everybody had the complaint side down pat. I mean, everybody knows how to complain. Nobody knows how to resolve things. So my philosophy was, that's a big problem. You brought me a wonderful problem. I'll go solve it. Come back to me with a program to solve that problem.
Plan the program. Yeah. So when's your class?
Thursday at 10:30, tomorrow. Tomorrow at 10:30.
Chief Flood's first time teaching at FDIC, and that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Did you get saliva back yet?
Yeah. Yes, I was on the flight out here, and I didn't, my mouth was dry, and all I had was Coldy's capsules, lozenges. So I was sucking on them to keep my mouth from being dry, and my mouth became a zinc mine. So fortunately, my voice came back, or unfortunately, and I was able to do this thing.
So anybody out there that's listening to FDIC, I highly recommend this class. It's going to give you some things that you might be lacking or maybe not lacking, but if you pick up one thing, I think it's worth the effort. I've been to some incredible classes this week. I'm still so excited to be here. I'm grateful to Bobby Halton, Diane, and the whole Penwell staff that I am fortunate enough to be instructing here. That is like the coolest thing in the world. I can't believe I'm saying it. But and 3M and Scott for helping pay for all of this. The vendors here are absolutely incredible, and they make this all happen. And I'm thrilled to be part of it.
And you know what? It's there are a lot of people that you see here every year over and over again, and they're not necessarily instructors. And always try and encourage them. Listen, and I could 3 or 4 people come directly to mind, but I don't want to mention names. But I always try and encourage them. You know what? We started the same way that you're thinking about it. Put in for a class. All they can say is no, and then you put in again. But eventually, if you sort of, you start from scratch and keep scratching, you maybe wind up here as an instructor, and that's a beautiful thing. It gives confidence, and you're passing information on, and that's the biggest thing about this show is people take back to their departments.
One thing I want to add to that: everybody is intimidated by the instructors. Every instructor here is a real human being. And most of all, they're real firefighters. They're just like you. All these people that you think are so, they're great. Don't misunderstand me. And when I first started teaching, I was afraid to put in. I go, I can't teach with them. But the come up, ask questions, talk to them, ask your instructor questions. This is what happened in my department. What do you think I should? They want to share. They're here to share their knowledge. So take advantage of it while you're here and bring it home.
I always call it the beer mug case study. I mean, lots of great classes here, and you have to take advantage of every class that there is. But one of the biggest learning tools that I've found here is the beer mug case study, where you're just out meeting and networking and talking to people and just, learning from people, learning from you. You're making contacts with people and the business just keep rolling forward. That's the beauty of this. People from all over the world come to this conference.
34,000 people.
So talk about your class.
My class, I did it Monday morning, so you're not going to make it this year. Maybe next year I'll be back. But I taught a class called Fighting Private Dwelling Fires. Private dwellings are the most common structure fire in the United States and Canada, by far. 75% of our civilian lives that are lost are in private dwelling fires, residential fires. And we all think it's common. It's just a routine house fire, it's just a house fire. But in Brooklyn, they go into house fires. In Chicago, they go into house fires. Mineola, Long Island, Gilt Edge, Tennessee, house fires is what we do. This is where we have the most impact on the public and save the most lives. It's also where we heard a ton about firefighters. The combat line of duty, that's excluding heart attacks, crashes, and things like that. It's up to 46% of line of duty deaths are at residential fires. So that says something. That's just routine. It's not routine.
Well, the residential building is the least regulated building in the construction world. And so every time you go into a private dwelling, you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised by the bicycle in front of you when you're dragging the hose. You're going to be surprised by the loose riser, and as your foot goes through it, you're going to be surprised. You're going to be surprised all through the building because you can't pre-plan those. You can assess and make a size up and understanding the physics of fire, how it's insulting the building and all the different ways, but you don't know what the owner and the residents of that building are up to.
So true.
Wild card pops up a lot in those buildings.
And open staircases.
More than any other building. People, you get that freak out factor when you have a high rise because, fire's way up there. Oh my God, what are we going to do? But you really think about the fire, the building's designed to hold the fire where it is. But people don't shrink with fear when they see the private dwelling fire, where in reality, as the chief just said, it's like it's like a Pandora's box a lot of time.
And a lot of hoarding is a big thing today.
Mm-hmm.
You never know what you're going to find.
No.
Drug factories, but I'm not going to get into drugs. Not enough time left to get into that part of it.
Oh, good.
Anyway, it's been fun to be here again. Thank you to FDIC, Penwell Corporation,
Absolutely.
and Scott. Scott, again, we're so lucky to have them help finance this.
Yeah, this is an amazing thing. I thank you for inviting us, Jim. Buy Full Contact Leadership and buy your friend one.
My kids need shoes.
All right.
Fire Engineering Talk Radio.
about 49
How you doing? My name's Mark Lamplugh, and you're listening to a live edition of Firefighter Wellness Radio at FDIC 2018. This is my first year doing the show at FDIC, actually live, so this is pretty special for me, and this is also one of the first years that I'm teaching a class, I believe, on Friday, 10:30. And I'm here with a good friend of mine, Mike Healy, who him and I both have worked together in the past, and been really in contact, helping firefighters and EMS struggling with mental health and addiction issues. So I wanted to have him on the show because he's been doing this a lot longer than I have. So he's seen a lot more changes in this topic and in this area than me. So he can pretty much talk about, a lot of the good things that I've seen going on, and I think we're finally starting to turn a corner on talking about behavioral and mental health issues. I want to thank 3M Scott Fire and Safety for sponsoring the show. Without them doing that, we won't be able to give you all this great programming. So, Mike, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay, good. My name is Mike Healy. I joined the Volunteer Fire Service in Rockland County, which is about 15 miles north of New York City, in 1970. So I've been around for 48 years. I've been chief of the Central Nine Fire Department on 3 different occasions. And when I retired from New York City Transit, I was the clinical director of their counseling unit. And I wanted to do something for not only the volunteer, but all firefighters throughout the country that had nowhere to call when they needed help. It's 2018. The fire service is finally coming to terms with the fact, just like with our keynote speaker today, Dan DeGrace, talking about behavioral health in the fire service. I've answered the hotline, Fire EMS hotline now for the NVFC Share the Load program for 5 years. When I started doing it, I never had any idea just how many calls I would receive and just the depth of the pain that's out there. I received, last year I received over 2,000 calls, anything from PTSD to substance abuse to anxiety disorder, depression, and it's been a life-changing experience for me. Like I said, I've been in the fire service for 48 years, so I've seen it go from when I first joined on the back step of the truck where we barely had any gear, we never wore an air pack, into a science that has conformed, changed us into a real powerful force. But our troops are really hurting. They're really getting beat up, and it's a great experience to see how things are changing, how life in the firehouse is starting to change, how guys are starting to open up when they're in pain.
I was thinking over there, I think I started coming to FDIC about 6 or 7 years ago consistently, coming almost every year. And I remember in the beginning when I first started coming, you would see maybe 1 class on behavioral health or maybe 2. Till now, if you look at the schedule this year, there's at least half a dozen classes on behavioral health. So just, that alone, it's just seeing, the more classes that are available that people can learn and get, the things to see and how to help others. So the Share the Load program that's still working with the NVFC. So I don't think many firefighters may not know this, but that's a free service they can use, right?
That's a free service they can use. No fire department, no firefighter is ever charged for anything. Like I said, I've had calls from I'm in New York. I've had calls from Peoria, Illinois, from Portland, Oregon, and there's a method I can use to get them help. It's not a call line to sit on the phone for half an hour and say this is what's been going on today. If you're suffering from PTSD, you need help. I mean, you need to see a therapist. You probably need some EMDR treatment, which is eye motion desensitization reprocessing. The great thing about EMDR, it doesn't involve any drugs. You can usually find it right in your hometown by a therapist who's trained in it, and it's usually covered by your insurance. So, you know, I probably, you know how it is in the fire service. Do 1,000 things right, nobody says a word. Do one thing wrong, and they're on the phone. I've never gotten a call back saying this didn't work.
Yeah.
I have had calls back from people whose lives it actually transformed. Substance abuse is another issue. You know, we have a tradition in the fire service of maybe tipping a few, maybe a few too many, but it gives them an outlet. If nothing else, I can get them pointed in the right direction, and they can take the steps that they need to take. You know, beyond that, suicides. You know, the thing that everybody in the fire service wanted to go like this. You know, we had 84 line of duty deaths this year, but nobody counted the 116 suicides that happened that we know of. You know, and I've been for the last 5 years working with my buddy Jeff Dill, who is really dedicated to that subject, and it's absolutely terrible what's going on that we have that going on. But you know, we're human beings. You can't see what we see. You can't hear what we hear or smell what we smell, and not have a result from that, because we are human. We go back to the firehouse. Nobody wants to say anything about what's going on with them because they don't want to feel like the weak link in the chain. So they don't tell anybody. But with the Fire EMS hotline, you're anonymous. I don't even ask for your name. I don't ask you what department you're from. And guys will talk to me. Usually what I'll do when I get a call is I'll say, so you're a firefighter? Yeah. Well, where do you work? In the engine of the truck? Right away they know they're talking to another fireman. And breaks the ice a little bit, and we get to an open conversation about what's going on with them. Yeah. I only ask them one thing: what's your first name? And the rest of it, they're usually more than willing to give.
And another thing that I have, I try to tell guys that usually call too, and you'll notice, they get the ones that call and say, well, I tried EMDR and it didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. Well, how many times did you go? Well, I went twice.
Right.
You know, you got to complete these therapies. You know, you're not going to feel 100% right away.
Right.
You didn't get to the point you were at overnight. You know, so you're not going to get better overnight. It's a process. When you start taking advantage of some of these therapies, and you got to see it through, just like you would see any kind of trainings through or anything like that.
Right. And when I get a caller, I usually tell them, look, go to your computer, type EMDR into your browser. It'll pop right up. Eye motion desensitization reprocessing. Read about it. You're not going to get a needle. Nobody's going to hurt you.
No,
right. And to me, the biggest thing is that no drugs.
Yeah.
You know, I have guys calling on antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication and stuff like that. And the first thing I tell them is I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
But, you know, you may want to try this out. You know, don't come off any medication without speaking to your physician first. I said, but you may want to try the EMDR out.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think, you know, oftentimes that's one of the first go-to methods in a world of quick fixes is, you know, drugs, and then you end up with another problem on top of another problem. How a lot of these guys, you know, these firefighters and stuff like that get to where they're at, they're running and gunning, they're working 2 jobs. You know, they can't sleep. They go to the doctor. They tell the doctor, I'm not sleeping. The doctor says, well, take this every night to go to sleep. And the doctor doesn't sit down for 5 minutes and say, hey, well, you know, what's going on? Why aren't you sleeping? What can you adjust in your life to make you sleep a little bit better? And then you know, you start drinking on top of that medication, and then in a year you're calling up because you got alcohol problems, you got PTSD problem, and a drug problem.
Exactly, and I also usually, one of the first questions I'll ask the firefighter when they call, how's your anger? What do you mean? You find yourself like jumping out and yelling at your spouse or your children, and then 10 minutes later you're saying, why did I yell? That wasn't that big a deal. That's a definite result of a lot of stuff going on in your head. You're not even in the room when that happens. That's why you look back on it and say, that wasn't that big a deal. Why did I yell at it? It's so important that we get this stuff out there. And I think now that it's out there, I think that the bigger organizations in the fire service will start like fire engineering. You see more and more articles on it. I just did an article for the MBFC on the importance of the MDR. Mm-hmm. And what's happening is it's actually starting to cause conversation in the firehouse.
Yeah.
And that's the important part, where you can come back and say, it's not something usually that happened today. It's usually something that happened 3 weeks ago or 3 years ago or something like that. And you can actually turn around and say to the person next to you in the firehouse, remember that call we had? I've been dreaming about it, and stuff like that happens. I have one of the worst calls I went on was from when I was 19 years old. I'm 64. I remember every single thing about that triple fatality and an automobile accident. 3 high school kids from town. And I remember everything about it. I don't remember what I had for lunch today, but I remember that call. And that's some of that stuff sticks with us.
Yeah. And I know another thing I've noticed too, and this, firefighters themselves may not know this, but we know because of what we do as our careers. There's now the availability of actual facilities and programs to go to that do specialized tracks for firefighters. 10 years there may have been one,
Right.
And now there's a dozen, 2 dozen. The new program I'm working for, the new one you're working for,
right.
Where you have private organizations now allowing us, they're recognizing that firefighters and EMS need help, and they're allowing us to put programs together for those firefighters that may need some residential care and stuff like that.
And one of the important things there is that if there's 5 or 6 firefighters or police officers or EMS workers or corrections officers, you get them in a room together, and they actually start opening up and they start learning how to share about what's going on in their life rather than coming home and keeping it a secret. And some of the stuff that you hear is absolutely, stuff that we've all seen, but stuff that we never talked about in the firehouse. That stuff is starting to, and when they start opening up, you can just start seeing the weight come off their shoulders. That's something that was just never discussed.
Yeah. And they don't realize it either. You're walking around, with just, anxious kind of urge to yourself. And, you go off, one little sound, rattles you, and and oftentimes they don't even know what it is. And then when they find out, it's like, oh my God, all this time, I've been living like this, sometimes for years, not even realizing it, So the share low with the MBFC, I know when I was doing some stuff with the hotline, are you still doing trainings and stuff like that?
I did. Matter of fact, just those 2 gentlemen who just left, North Bergen Regional Fire and Rescue, I actually trained their whole department. Went down there and did with every shift and did about an hour class with them. And I just did one with Suffolk County, New York fire districts. Yeah, because it's important that they know. It's important for the fire, for the not only the guys in the firehouse, but the bosses, the fire districts, the commissioners, the chiefs, and everything else to get on board with this, so that they can, part of the thing is, walk it off. When you break your leg when you were a kid playing football, and Dad would say, "Go ahead, walk it off."
Yeah.
We can't do that.
Yeah.
We can't do that because people are dying because of it, and people's lives are messed with. People are getting divorced, and it's tough. But now the like I say, the commissioners and stuff like that, they're getting to be involved in it and stuff like that, and they're playing a big part in making it better for the troops to come.
Yeah, it's another thing too, and something I think we really need to work on is the stigma, around the substance abuse issues. And probably about a month ago, I did a little survey on Twitter, which you don't use too much, but I'm more involved in the social media. But they have a way that you can ask questions and people will answer them. And I asked a question: how many believe that addiction is a disease? And I forget the exact numbers, but it was an overwhelming amount believed that addiction was a disease. So then I asked another set of questions a couple days later. How many of you believe that a firefighter should be fired if they have drugs in their urine? So an overwhelming amount of people answered yes, they should be fired. So by that percentages, even though people believe that addiction is a disease, they still believe that they should be fired for having that disease.
Yeah, and New York City Fire Department used to be, if you were caught, you were done. They just changed that. I believe it was last week. They just changed it that you'll have the opportunity to get help.
Yeah.
I just did a roundtable discussion last week with the NBFC at their spring benefits meeting with a major from the New Jersey State Troopers and a doctor who worked on a poison control center in New Jersey on firefighters and opioids. It's very simple how this is happening, and I've gotten the calls. You're going up, you're going to get the roof. You go up there, take the K-12 saw with you. You get up there, you start the saw, you start cutting. You start pulling the roof, you turn the wrong way, and you wrench your back. Herniated disc. Go to the doctor. What's he going to give you? Opiate. He's going to give you Vicodin. He's going to give you Percocet. He's going to give you OxyContin or Oxycodone. So you start taking it. Now, doctors are under the microscope today. The feds are watching them very carefully so that they don't get people addicted. But now they're already addicted. Yeah. I mean, there were cases where they were getting 90 pills at one shot.
Yeah.
So addiction is very simple. I mean, if you start taking more than you're supposed to take, the body then needs more to get rid of the original pain.
Well, it's the opiates. It only takes 3 continuous days of taking that medication till you start experience some signs of withdrawal if you stop.
Right. A friend that I worked with in the addiction field, who was a heroin junkie in the early 60s. I said to him, "What is it with heroin?" And he said, "Mike, ever do it." He said, "You're addicted like that." And that's what's happening. And what happens is now the doctor won't prescribe the opiates because the feds are watching them. And you go to buy them on the street, it could be $30 a pill, and heroin's $10 a bag. And that's where you wind up with people that were police officers, firefighters, all sorts of professionals that are winding up with these addictions.
I had a police chief one time, like model to the community, police chief. One of them.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's very uncomfortable coming off. The detox it won't kill you, but you'll want to be dead to come off to detox from the drugs. The only drug that can actually kill you from stopping it immediately is alcohol. That's why detoxes even exist today.
Yeah, so I think, per those, I think that's the next kind of shift I would like to see start happening is more of a, breaking down stigmas and more explanations of the disease of addiction and, the education around how you can get it and how easily you can get it. Because just from then the set of questions that I asked, people don't understand that. That's a perfect example. You believe that it is a disease, but then you believe people should be fired for having it.
Right.
And it's not so simple as to the fact that people are committing crimes to paramedics stealing drugs or from patients. They should be punished for those crimes. But to be fired, everybody should, I think, be given a chance. And I think a lot, like you said, FDIC, a lot of departments are starting to, but there's many out there that don't. Get caught once, that's it.
That's
You're
it.
done.
And I'm also getting calls, just imagine you're a firefighter or a police officer or anything in the emergency service or any job at all. And you get a call from your wife when you're on duty who says that she just found she was putting away clothes in your daughter's dresser drawers and she finds 15-year-old daughter and she finds 5 hypodermic needles. You know, I've gotten that call too. What do I do? And you know the industry, you're not really going to find a place easily for a 15-year-old addicted to heroin, but this is the stuff that's going on out there. So imagine that guy or that woman in the firehouse and the stress that's on her now when they go out to the next alarm, and they're not thinking about anything they're going to be doing. They're thinking about my God, my 15-year-old daughter's addicted to heroin. You know, it's a real problem. When they say that it's an absolute epidemic, they're 100% right.
Yeah.
Look at your local papers. 23 years old, 36 years old, 31 years old. Those are all opioid overdoses. You know, there's probably a few that is something else, but I know in my town, very affluent town, like I say, 15, 20 miles north of New York City, bedroom community, 600, 700, $800,000 houses, 2 Mercedes in the driveway, and the ME's pulling up and taking a 23-year-old kid, you know, out of the house.
Do you the shared a load phone number?
The shared load phone number is 888-731-3473, which is the number for a fire, 3473.
And you know, anybody can call that number, you know, to get help. No, there's no stupid question. You know,
right?
If you're struggling with something or you think somebody else.
Oh, that's a stupid question. Right, like I have a smell of natural gas, and so people think that it's a number to call fires in. I've had people come in, I smell natural gas in my house. I think my neighbor's house is off, but please, hang up and dial 911.
Or you get the call, it was the Discovery credit card. But somebody's going to answer that, you know, specifically a former firefighter or, you know, an active firefighter who's going to be able to help you and get you to where you need to go, you know, in your local town. And it's a great thing that they're doing. And I believe you can reach out to the MVXD, get posters for your fire department.
Sure.
Yeah, they'll send you all
or go on their website.
So what have you been up to now? Let's know Mike Healy as well.
I just went out as chief for the 3rd time. I'm a grandfather of 7. My wife has asked me to please stop responding to fires in the middle of the night. And I'm onto a few new ventures and stuff like that. But for the most part, I'm so thrilled that we could do something for the men and women of the fire service. And that, like I said in the beginning, that the fire service has finally opened up their eyes to this, that there's great guys out there like Jeff Dill doing the suicide investigations and workshops all over the country, and onto new and brighter horizons.
And then we got, so if you're live at FDIC, I have my class, it's Friday at 10:30. Trauma, substance abuse in the fire service, where I'll be going over, you know, signs and symptoms of substance abuse in firefighters, what to look out for, some specific examples of guys I've helped in the past, and the guys that don't listen to you. How many of them have called, and you give them the roadmap of what to do, and no, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and then you hear stories, or they're calling you back 6 months later, I lost my job now, and it's like, well, I lost my family, my wife. Well, if you would have it's the only thing in the world that you have that you still think you can fix on your own or your way.
Right.
If a doctor said that you had brain cancer and he said you need to do all this and you need to take this medication and you need to do this chemotherapy for 7 months, you wouldn't tell that, you know, cancer doctor, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do it this way. Yeah, you would listen to what he had to say, but for whatever reason, we think that we can do this stuff on our own.
Right. That's usually the last 2 things that will get somebody to get help: the loss of the family or the loss of the job.
Yeah.
And that's usually the straw that breaks the camel's back. They'll usually make a move after that, or they'll continue their behavior and they'll lose their family and lose their job. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah. You don't have to get to that point where you're losing everything. You can actually get help and go back to your firehouse and take some of those programs and the stuff that you learn and help others. So, Mike, thanks for coming on. You were the first person I thought of when they asked me to do this. So, we've done this show a lot together. I want to thank Fire Engineering and FDIC for having me on and having me teach this year, and 3M, Scott Fire and Safety for sponsoring the show. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Fire Engineering Talk Radio.
I wasn't sure how long.
Starting their years in the fire service, allowing you to call and speak with them live. An experience you can only find on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. So thanks for joining us. Enjoy and stay safe.
Good afternoon, everybody out there in podcast land and Google Talk land. Matt McDowell with Save Firefighter, and I'm joined today by Jason Jonson, which we just call him JJ, and Chris Garnowitz, my partners in crime. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Fire Engineering for inviting us to have this opportunity, and our sponsor, 3M Scott Fire and Safety. They're the proud sponsor of the radio show and the radio shows that you've enjoyed so far. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's going to be pretty laid back. Just want to give these guys an opportunity to kind of talk about the classes that they've taught and the classes that they're getting ready to teach, and how we feel that the topics are relevant to the fire service today and why you should support them. So I guess we'll start with JJ first. If I get him to stop texting people live on the internet, it's okay.
Hey, everyone.
He's live streaming our live stream. So JJ, tell us about the class that you taught yesterday, and give us a summary and how you think it's relevant.
Thanks. I did my 4-hour workshop yesterday afternoon at 1:30. Proven truck tactics that might surprise you. I think I had around 44, 45 students in there. Pretty pretty good attendance. We had a good time, and pretty much what I do is I use all the acquired buildings that I've obviously gained access to down at Columbia, South Carolina, and we just went over the experiments and the trials that we performed and incorporate them again into the operations of our department, and just covered a lot of the truck tactics that a lot of people are into now, and the hot new stuff. And we kind of just experimented with all the data that I've gained on times on, for roof ventilation. I broke it down into the timing of probationary firefighter, a 1 to 2 year firefighter, and a 3 year plus experienced firefighter. And I just, again, incorporated all that data into a 4-hour workshop. And everyone, I read the evaluations this morning. I had some real good evaluations. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I can do something next year with it as well. So we'll see.
Did you have any angry elves?
I had one angry elf. There's always one angry elf, and he gave me a 3, which is average. But on the notes, he said he wanted it to be a hot class. So I don't know how that becomes an angry elf. You give me a 3, but you want it to be a hot class. So I appreciate the angry elf for the vote conference.
So I was able to sit in JJ's class yesterday as well, and I think the takeaway from it is when you get into small to mid-sized departments and you're thinking about implementing truck company operations, or if you're combating the reputation of quote-unquote truckies and truck work, a lot of times there's a lack of understanding, because historically everybody is heavily reinforced with structural line, flow water, and if you go to any fire, there are exponentially more engines and more hose lines on the ground than there are usually people running around supporting that operation. And I think that you did a good job in your class of reframing that terminology of it's not truck operations, it's support operations.
Right.
And we're there to support the engine, even though we can still be, knuckle dragging truckies. You're ultimately there to do a job and perform specific functions in support of getting water on the fire. And a lot of times, especially with what we know about fire behavior now, and the importance of coordination and making the building behave the way that we want it to by controlling and isolating areas of the building and controlling and isolating our involvement with it, to me, the science has reinforced the need for good truck work or good support operations. And I think when you're trying to implement that into a department, the hard part is understanding that coordination.
Right.
And the one thing that you have a great opportunity to do in Columbia with those acquired structure buildings is you get real-time, real-world results and research into how long it takes to do a specific task, and you can do it at full speed in conjunction with engine companies.
Right.
And to have a platform like FDIC to come and share that with people, that could help a smaller department sell the concept of support operations or a truck company to their administration and say, look, I know we don't have the staffing. There were quite a few people in the class that said, hey, I'm from a volunteer department. I don't know who's on the back.
Right.
That's a real world problem. That I think a lot of people who are in departments with good staffing take for granted.
Right. And we hit that a good bit, especially on the breaks for the number of guys that were in there that were from volunteer departments. We talked about, it was really about the tactics and the skill work that we addressed, numbers and stuff like that. Because obviously, especially when it came to some of the flat roof ventilation, the more guys you had, obviously, the quicker, as far as you follow the right techniques and solves, the time was cut literally 80% quicker and more efficient. But as long as every member of that volunteer organization or volunteer department, career / part-time department, as long as they understood the steps and the tactics and when to use them and when not to use them, usually the numbers still kind of rounded off pretty quickly. So yeah, we had really good conversation. Out of 4 hours, we probably talked about engine stuff for 15 minutes. And then the other 3 hours and 45 minutes, I definitely dogged them. So it was very enjoyable.
We tried to get Jonas Smith to come in here and join us for our podcast, which he routinely does. And he's probably outside the door listening right now.
Right.
He chickened out.
Yeah. He was scared.
He's an engine guy, and we were going to talk about truck stuff.
Right.
So he gets scared.
But I did attend Jonas' class Monday morning, all things engine. And he did a very good job. It was very, very good.
John always does a good job.
Yeah.
So again, if you need an opportunity, if you're trying to implement some truck work into your department, you have a chance hopefully next year, maybe even a hands-on class to attend proven truck tactics. Definitely get a hold of us, get a hold of JJ, and hopefully, if nothing else, we'll see it here.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Send him emails.
Send lots of emails.
Send lots of emails, positive emails.
I'm going to post his address, phone number, and email on Facebook. So you can check that out.
That's right. Send me postcards.
So it's kind of a natural segue over to Chris's class, which is tomorrow.
Tomorrow morning.
You want to tell us about that class?
Sure. Tomorrow morning, 10:30. I think I'm in 102, 103, all the way down on the end. Everyone is a truckie, even if they won't admit to it. Title of the class. It's actually a great segue from what JJ was talking about. We have a ton of volunteer departments, especially, of course, down by us. The Southeast is kind of ripe with volunteer paid on call and small departments that don't necessarily have a dedicated truck company. So that begs the question, how do you perform all of these truck tactics? How do you perform the skills? How do you learn the skills? And my answer to that, not to ruin the class, is that we already know the skills. You learn the skills with your basic firemanship in recruit school, and it's a question of how do we make the department upper management, the chief officers, the councils, the city councils, the managers, how do we make them take notice? And then how do we work ourselves into a position where they're willing to buy us either a dedicated apparatus, dedicate a specific apparatus, and give us that designation of a truck company, even without the ladder on top. It's something that I attended Jim Walsh's class this morning, and he has the same talk with that he did in Winter Park, where they didn't have a truck and they finally got a truck. And how do you get a small department to get there? And that's what,
which is somewhere that we came from as well.
Which is somewhere we came from. Our original truck company was a KME International engine with a rural cab and a 24-foot ladder and maybe enough hose to stretch if we could find a hydrant. So what's the progression? And tomorrow I'm going to put out some ideas. I'm going to put some ideas out there and give everybody kind of my thoughts and my take on how the best way is to go about building yourself and building your department a good, solid truck foundation.
Well, and that was something that actually JJ talked about in his class, which I know that we always address in our classes as well, is that forcible entry ultimately is an engine skill. Mm-hmm. Now, and as JJ stated yesterday, there is definitely a threshold there where you get into more of the specialized stuff. You're working on a heavily reinforced door, you got bars on the windows, you get into heavier stuff like that. Yeah, you're transitioning to where you need some support operations.
Or some of your more finesse through the lock type door work is also not just a set of irons.
Right, but I think with your class you can accentuate that point, that just because you don't have a ladder truck, just because you don't have a truck doesn't mean that support operations don't exist, and that there's not a need for them. And I know that where we come. So good.
Well, I was gonna say, if you boil it all down to its essence, and I think both of you agree with me, this truck operations really are everything but putting water on the fire. Okay. Because as JJ, as you were saying in your class, if you look at truck operations as a support function of the fire ground, right? That support, the ultimate support is making sure that we can get water on the fire. Right. Yeah. So everything that encompasses protecting that engine company, giving them the best chance of rapidly finding the fire and putting it out, is truck company operations. Right. And
yeah. And I think that's where
and we get to drag knuckles, break stuff, and get dirty.
Yes. Yeah, and to just bump on that, like I said yesterday in class, I believe basic forcible entry is an engine company skill because, coming from Columbia where 31 engines and pretty much 4 ladders, the engine is generally going to get on scene before the ladder. And if the door is locked, you can't get water on fire, then what are we doing? So basic forcible entry is definitely an engine company scale, and I truly believe that. Now, once, like Matt said, there is a threshold, there's a thin line where it starts getting to hardened doors, you know, some reinforced stuff where, all right, maybe we don't have the tools.
Building up.
Right. We don't have the tools, or maybe, you know, some of the training like the truck guys do to where we can get through that. But basic forcible entry, basic through the lock stuff is an engine company skill all day. They're the one that goes on the medical call, and, you know, they might have to go through a lock. But again, through just society and the fire service, a lot of people have taken that and split it off to, hey, that's the ladder company function. And I don't believe that.
Well, and I think, you know,
we can't give engines too many problems right now.
No,
let's one at a time.
We'll slow it down. We'll slow it down a little bit. Well, so I think the one thing that I've noticed just in the titles of classes and just in general, and maybe it's the what the word is, how much social media plays into it, and how important headlines are becoming, that now what you call things is extremely important. And I know that coming up, it was, you had engine operations and truck operations. And there was a very well-defined line, and you were either an engine or a truckie. Right. And that was, but now I think, on the back of the research and understanding how these fires are behaving inside these buildings and how they're growing, how the heat is spreading, how, you know, the volume of fuel and smoke that's coming out of it, the importance of that support function, you know, I see, and I know that we do it, and I know that you did it yesterday, is, you know, there might be truck in the title, but usually when we're having a conversation, you're almost always defaulting to calling it support operations. You know, it's that verbiage, you know, it's that messaging. You know, it's not truck operations, it's support operations. It needs to happen on every fire.
Right, and you can break it down even further and say, you know, we're all firefighters. Right. Whether I work on a truck, a rescue, whether I work on an engine, it doesn't really matter. I'm a firefighter. My job is to put out fire, and I put out fire assigned a task, and whether it's a support role, whether it's ventilation, whether it's salvage, you know, if that function leads to a more effective protection of life, property, the environment, then I'm doing my job as a firefighter and I'm accomplishing my goal. Engine guy may have to open a door, and an engine guy may have to take a window. It's just, it's not something that, you know, they look at and they wilders them. But, you know, it's tasks assigned. Like you said, it's verbiage. And I like to think that at the end of the day, we're all firefighters. Just the military, they're all infantrymen. You know, but
within the unit, they all have a little bit of a specialty.
They have a little bit of a specialty. And so, you know, someone like JJ might be much better topside at a fire, working on a roof, than advancing a hose line.
That's actually a true story.
True story.
That's very true.
Just think of it as rope with water in it.
Yes.
I've seen you do that.
Okay. As long as we're good with that. You know, but I think the fire service is evolving, and we are changing. You see a lot of changing vernacular that we, you know, with flow paths and laminar flow and all of these terms and verbiage that we never used to use. You know, support operations, I think, isn't a hard stretch for changing how we discuss, you know, the operation of a fireground.
Well, and to talk about that a little bit, how important is verbiage? You know,
Well,
like, you know, truck versus support, ventilation versus flow path.
I think it depends on what you're trying to define. If you know, I went a couple of years ago, I took a class out on the West Coast, and they're like, "Oh, you're from the East Coast, you're a nut." I'm like, "You're from the West Coast, you're a nut," because what we do is the same job. The verbiage is different between what they refer to tools and apparatus by, the same as us. So it becomes important if we're trying to have a conversation about the fireground, I think. Though in general, if as a department or a locality, you know, I'm in the low country, so all of us tend to use the same verbiage. You know what I mean? But if when I was out on the West Coast, they're like, "Where's your VA?" I'm like, "Baracus? I don't know what you're talking about." So they refer to a Scott. You know, if I said, "Give me a Scott pack," you would know exactly what I was asking for. They refer to it as a breathing apparatus, and that
initially just kind of caught me off guard. The reference to being topside as opposed to on a roof. They're small things, but I won't say they'll cripple a fire ground, but they will confuse you
for a second.
For that second.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be, fire ground wise with your mutual aid companies or your automatic aid companies to have the same verbiage.
Well, and so to take that a step further, how important does that become when you're talking about selling ideas? Because again, in both your class and in your class, you're selling the idea of truck work. But I think in both your classes,
we're selling support operations.
Actually message it as support operations.
And that's what I tried to do yesterday, because I always have to remember, again, being here in Indianapolis, like you said, there were numerous people. There was someone from Maine yesterday. There was someone, I think, from Idaho. So like I made sure to define it and explain it. Well, this is what we're talking about. This is what I'm going to refer to. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're confused, let me know. Sure. But I think that's what the advantage is of being here in Indianapolis for FDIC is what we're talking about. We're out here now, and like Chris was saying, go seek out those West Coasters and talk to them and say, hey, what do you call this? What do you call this? And we can talk about it here. And I think that's what we were talking out in the hallway before we came in the room, how awesome it is. And I think it's one of my favorite parts is the networking part of FDIC. We can spend so much time walking in the hallway. I'm never on time for classes because I'm always talking to someone. I see someone and I see their badge. And I'm like, ooh, you're from LA. Do you know this person? Do you know this person? Everyone knows someone. It's a small world. And I think that's the best part of being here at Indianapolis FDIC.
So as truckee purists, see this? This is my hand on the pen. All right. So as truckee purists, would you be willing to, let's say, sell a concept like VEIS? If that's what it took to implement it into your organization.
I'm going to answer that because we just ran into this problem. And it's not a problem. It's again, we'll go back to verbiage. So I don't have a problem selling VEIS. The I is silent. The State Fire Academy, we just rewrote the truck company and it's now support company operations class. And we added in the Vent Enter Search segment VEIS. The reason we did that is to keep a consistency throughout the academy curriculum because the academy has it mentioned in a number of classes as VEIS, and we didn't want to confuse that terminology.
Right.
If they're like, well, this says VES, this says VEIS. So I don't have a problem selling that type of material, that type of explanation of a tactic or a skill.
Right.
But I also, flip side, jumping on the grenade, the flip side of that is I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I think if you are giving someone the requisite knowledge and the skills to perform a task, if they remember it better, VEIS, then let them keep the I.
Right.
If they can remember it VES and they know that their first job is to isolate that room, then let them leave the I out.
Sure. Right.
Now,
I completely
shock
agree with
gap set force.
That's how I was taught. It's VES.
Yeah.
It's VES. And even if let's say every curriculum in the country, hypothetical, changed it to VEIS, I'm still calling it VES. That's what I grew up on. That's what I was taught. I was taught the most important thing is once you enter, to shut the door. That's just me. That's just you.
And that's the progression.
I agree. If you're trying to keep it consistent and just sell it, if that's how they want to sell it, that's fine. Because as long as you teach the skill to the appropriate level and you teach the appropriate skill, I think we're fine.
You teaching your department. Sorry, I'm going to keep going. Right. So you teaching your department, you're a training officer. So you're teaching your department vertical ventilation skills.
Right.
You teach half of the companies that it's top, outside, inside, bottom, and then the other half that it's top, outside, bottom, inside. You know what I mean? If you want to keep this consistency, if you teach it one way and you teach it consistently one way, but give the personnel the option to say, hey, listen, this way is not going to work this time.
Right. We actually teach the roll 3, cut 3.
Or roll 3, cut 3. But you give them the information to say, hey, listen, this is how we do it. This is how we remember to do it. But understand that's not the definitive end all be all of the skill.
Well, and so to expand this a little bit, because we just got a few more minutes, is both of your classes, you know, and with the 30,000 plus firefighters that are coming to the show this week.
The 30,000 truckies?
We have anything to do with it.
But there's Jonah.
And Jonah.
29,999.
You know, but again, as critical as support operations are, and to me, you know, being in a position now where I have to sell ideas, I don't have to train on tactics. I have to sell concepts.
Right. Sure.
You know, do you think that as a fire service in general, that sometimes we die on the sword?
Absolutely.
Because it's we need VES, we need VES, we need VES, and they're not biting off on it. And then you go back and you said, well, why didn't you get it? They wanted to call it VEIS. Absolutely not. That's not happening. Have you seen that or an example like that before?
Perfect example.
Like just one, you can't swallow that pride.
You'll appreciate that because this was a huge argument like last year. Hit it hard from the yard, that transitional attack. There were guys dying left and right. They're like, I'm not doing it. Real firemen climbing the fires. Put fires out. Don't fight fire from the yard. Well, when I was coming up in the fire service, and it's funny, I call it blue jean and flannel shirt firefighters. You'll remember Chief Cahill, okay? My original fire chief. And the advent, I think, of transitional attack was with the volunteer fire service. These guys would show up. I'd be fully dressed, ready to go. And these old school volunteers would show up in a pair of blue jeans and a flannel shirt, grab the nozzle, stick it through the door, swing it around a couple times, and knock the fire back while the rest of the guys were still getting there. Mm-hmm. And that's the start of that traditional attack. So, we've been doing it for decades. Someone just came up with a great little name for it,
right?
Called it transitional attack, and now you wound up with this huge argument about guys saying that's not how we fight fire,
right?
And I think a lot of that comes from that.
And then what is
aggressive and it's more urban culture where they have tons of firemen that can get them on scene rapidly, properly equipped, properly trained. They don't necessarily need that tactic. Rural fire department needs that tactic, right? And I think what we have to
interrupt you is, but a lot of the cage rattling comes from those larger departments that in all actuality it wouldn't even apply to.
Sure, it doesn't even apply there.
Like, yeah,
and we've done it where I work. We've done transitional attack. We're fully staffed, paid fire department, but we still every once in a while wind up running just a little bit short of manpower in our response times. And I think the fire service, like you said, we have a lot of guys who tend to just kind of die on the sword for their thoughts and beliefs.
For the pride.
And it's for the pride. And what you have to realize, and I'm going to tie it all the way back. You ready? You ready for this?
We're way over
all the way back. Okay. But I know, but we talk about support operations, the fire service as a whole, right? All of these little things that we have that we want to argue about whether or not they're right, whether we need the I, whether we need the transitional. It's all part of this fire service putting the fire out. It's all part of that support of getting the job done. And we as a fire service for 200 years, unimpeded by progress, have been putting the fire out as effectively as we can. And it doesn't matter what my job is, what your job is, what JJ's job is, because at the end of the day, whether it's 3 of us or 50 of us, fire's got to go out, people have to get saved, and the job's got to get done. Right? And we use all of the tools in the toolbox sometimes because that's what it takes. And it's not about arguing whether you should have done it that way, because if the fire's out at the end of the day, we did it the right way.
Good place to stop.
Oh. And the grenade exploded.
Thank you for the mic drop. All right. So again, thank you guys. Appreciate it. And again, thank you to our sponsor, 3M Scott Fire and Safety, for supporting the radio show and their support of FDIC and these podcasts. And again, thank you to Fire Engineer for giving us the opportunity to share our time with you and our opinions. I'll be promptly posting his email address on Facebook and some incriminating pictures.
Yes.
With that, y'all be safe and get it done, no excuses.
Thanks for tuning in to Fire Engineering Talk Radio.